Chapter 2:14 Always Number 1. While the Holy Flame Empire's imperial palace experienced turbulent currents, on top of the Profound Sea Dynasty's tallest monument, amidst a starry night, a couple jested under the moonlight. What virtue? What morality? With such words, how can I decline? Though it profoundly grieves me, I accept. As long as unrest plagues this land, my regency shall continue. And if eternity is what it takes for unrest to subside, then throughout eternity, I shall be regent. Bwahahaha. Shameless. Conrad, you're utterly shameless. Truly, Ulrich's most reasonable decision in his life was to make you his son. There probably isn't any other man able to call you son without blushing in shame. But now, the son has already surpassed the father, and he should call you teacher. Yvonne burst into laughter while mimicking Conrad's theatrical display of several days ago. Since then, he had entirely focused on official matters, spending his mornings, lunches, and evenings in court meetings to devise new economic strategies and hasten the recruitment of new talents. This was inarguably their first intimate moment since he took his new position. So what if I'm shameless? Shamelessness is the first step to greatness. The more shameless, the better. It is because I'm this bare-faced that I shall be supreme. Conrad candidly replied with a complacent smile and a dismissive wave of his hand. Oh, good, very good. Even forcing those hundreds of officials whose families you kept in captivity to follow you in your shameless act. I really want to ask, in your previous life, did you major in acting? I'm really starting to feel like you're a reincarnated actor. Naturally, not just acting, music, poetry, painting, writing. All the arts were subdued by me. You really dare say anything, don't you? Please accept my bow. With false seriousness, Yvonne clasped her hands and bowed toward Conrad. What? Don't believe me? Good. Tonight I must show you the depth of my skills and sincerely convince you. Hum. Conrad sat cross-legged and cleared his throat. Meanwhile, Yvonne lied on her side to listen to his display. In the eye of a storm, I fly on crippled wings, rowing against the current, clawing at our lost love, my heart roaring, my eyes vacant, and my soul crumbling. Deprived of my half, deprived of myself, helpless, I beg you, forgive and come home. Conrad declaimed with an impassioned voice and expression that would have tricked onlookers into thinking his words genuine. Even Yvonne was forced to admit that she almost mistook him for a desperate lover yearning for his partner's return. Not bad. I can see the semblance of a structure, but it doesn't rhyme. She teased with an amused smile. Poetry doesn't need to rhyme. As long as it pulls your heartstrings, my aim is achieved. Pinchim, it definitely pulls other strings, if you see what I mean. Yvonne replied with a sultry smile and alluring eyes that suggested a more carnal setting. Crossing the roof's tiles, Conrad crawled toward her, lying on top with his arms beside her shoulders and his purple eyes staring into her Hessenite hues. Bold. That's why you'll always be my number one. Good that you know, Yvonne declared, and with a yank on Conrad's collar, she brought his face onto hers for an ardent kiss. On the following morning, the disheveled pair awoke, arms in arms. This is the last court meeting I will personally attend. Afterward, I will take the most outstanding members of my harem into 3 days of closed-door cultivation. With the time-warping clock, that will be equivalent to 1 month, and with my current physique and resources, enough to bring them all to the transcendent rank. Afterward, we'll leave for the Tower of Rebirth. Conrad explained. You mean closed-door dual cultivation? Odd details. They then restored their clothes and left for the court meeting. As per usual, the emperor and high-ranking officials had already taken their post, patiently awaiting his arrival. Seeing Conrad stepping in, all turned away from the emperor to form an orderly line that showcased military discipline. Greetings, Grand Preceptor. The dozens of officials bowed with clasped hands, then knelt to welcome Conrad. As he reached the stairs leading to the imperial throne, the profound Sea Emperor stood up and bowed in greetings. Welcome, Grand Preceptor. We were waiting for your arrival. Please take your seat. Mitchim, you may all rise. Behind the emperor's throne lied a taller seat, cloaked by golden chain curtains. Conrad set the curtain aside and took his position. With the emperor a step below him, he looked like a puppeteer pulling strings from the shadows. The officials stood up, and the court session began. How is the imperial examination reform going? Conrad first asked, causing cold sweat to form on the officials' faces. Grand Preceptor, previously, only nobles were allowed to serve as officials. But now that we're opening the door to all, from low to high nobility, we're facing resistance. Although they don't dare challenge your will, they play tricks against the commoners, using their private forces to bully them into backing off. Hearing this, no ripple flashed on Conrad's face. Very well, draft an imperial decree. The nobility's private army privilege is, henceforth, revoked. From now on, nobles are forbidden from keeping private forces. Doing so is tantamount to rebellion. Offenders face family extermination. Moreover, all adult male nobles who fail the imperial examination must join the various divisions of the army. The high-ranking officials were startled. However, since this was Conrad's command, they naturally obeyed. The imperial decree was drafted and brought to Conrad, who signed it with the imperial seal. Also, investigate all the troublemakers, publicize the charge, and execute them for obstruction to the law. Conrad added, while patting his pet cobra, "As you command, Preceptor." Although much of the obstruction could be traced to their relatives, with Conrad's command, even if their parents were the guilty party, they would still execute them. Without disturbance, the court meeting carried on, and from beginning to end, the puppet emperor didn't open his mouth, occupying his throne in silence, with a slouched back. The meeting came to an end, and the officials departed, leaving only Conrad and the profound sea emperor within the room. Rising from his throne, he turned toward Conrad and gave him a polite bow. As you ordered, our men scoured the country, noble and commoner houses alike, to select top beauties. Across our profound sea dynasty's 8 billion citizens, the top 300 beauties have finally been assembled to serve you. Initially, the order was to select new concubines for the emperor, but all within the palace knew that those beauties were all meant for Conrad. The emperor could look but not touch. You may bring them in. Immediately, the profound sea emperor dispatched mental messages and had the 300 beauties brought in. Led by imperial eunuchs, they stepped in, forming orderly lines in the vast throne room. Awed by its splendor, some of commoner origin couldn't help but let their eyes drift. However, when their sight fell on the pair of men standing ahead, the throne room's splendor was quickly set aside. Of the two, the one dressed in an imperial robe and crown was completely ignored for the sake of the marvel sitting on the towering throne. Is this a man? Or is this a god? God. It must be the incarnation of a deity. The same thoughts spread within the mind of the 300 beauties, while butterflies fluttered within their stomachs and their knees weakened. With a smile, Conrad vanished and reappeared before them. "Welcome, lovely ones, to my harem." With a wave of his hand, he transported them into the space mansion and introduced them all to his demonic world of pleasure. Their crazed moans echoed throughout the entire mansion. Yvonne then took the reins, having more senior harem members settle the new girls in their quarters, while Conrad brought a start to meet the leading members of the harem. They would then leave for closed-door cultivation. Chapter 215. I don't want your abdication. Alongside Astarte, Conrad stepped into the room where the harem members he handpicked to follow him into the tower awaited with Yvonne's other pure self. There, Jasmine, Ileana, Daphne, Phaedra, Aliki, Freya, Zamira, and Lena sat cross-legged in silent cultivation. Having seen the countless beauties that filled Conrad's halls, Astarte was unalarmed and now understood why her makeover was necessary. Still, she was forced to admit that those who gathered within this room were a step above the rest. Yvonne especially stood out, with an oppressive aura that enforced obedience and commanded respect. As soon as the two stepped in, the ladies' eyes opened and fell onto them. "Ladies, Astarte, Astarte," Ladies, she is the last member of our congregation. Having already been briefed on their next destination by the avatars, none were startled and knew precisely why they gathered. Greetings, mistresses, Astarte said with a polite bow. But hearing that greeting, most of the ladies frowned. Usually, the women Conrad bothered introducing were bound to hold significant status within the harem. None would call them mistresses, and indeed, wrong. I am your master, yes, but they're your sisters. You only need to bow to the head consort and me. The rest, you treat like equals. Understood? Though surprised, Astarte quickly adjusted. As you wish, master, she replied with a vigorous nod. Conrad then motioned for her to sit, and she executed. More experienced in matters of warfare, Zamira could see that although the girl seemed mild and obedient, a strange battle intent was slowly building within her. Conrad then waved his hand, and in a purple haze, 5 of his harem avatars appeared beside him. Seeing the 5 identical versions of her master, Astarte was startled, but as she recalled all his supernatural abilities, her surprise lessened. Let's repeat the script. I will keep the Circer bodyguards for unexpected occurrences and carry on with our Grand Preceptor work, said the first one. I will get the Imperial Duke insignias back from Kron and have him maim the 10th Elder to give the appearance of an arduous escape. Alongside the wounded 10th Elder, we will then return to the Holy Flame Empire to carry on with our quest. We will have the Holy Flame spies we subdued coordinate with our version of the story. Of course, I will also be using the transformation skill to fake a Grand Priest cultivation. The second one continued. I will use the transformation skill to disguise myself into a eunuch and infiltrate the Earth Kingdom Alliance's royal palace to repeat the old scheme, silently taking over the harem. I will do the same in Great Void, and I in Prosperous Wind. When we successfully take control of the harems, we poison the monarchs and problematic heirs, then make Queen and Empresses Dowagers to control the Earth Alliance, Prosperous Wind, and Great Void's political scenes from the shadows. Deadline, 1 month. Conrad nodded. Good. All required resources will be set aside. As for the Holy Flame Empire, after my return from the tower, I will personally deal with the final assault. With that said, he stepped forward, then turned to sweep the gathered avatars. Failure is not in our vocabulary. Alongside his 5 avatars, Conrad declared. They then vanished in purple hazes, preparing to tackle their tasks. Witnessing this scene, even the likes of Jasmine and Ileana, who were used to the Avatar's strange connection, couldn't help but feel perplexed. Now, girls, it's time to cultivate. Those who need bloodline upgrades will have their bloodlines upgraded. Those who need better physiques will receive better physiques. For the next month, we'll have to work extra deep and hard. Emphasis on the deep and hard parts. Things may get messy, but you'll have to persevere. Conrad seriously said. Shameless, scoundrel, immoral, unredeemable, villain, rogue. They all cursed one after the other. However, when it came to Daphne's turn, well said. No matter how wet and sloppy things get, we should persevere. Instantly, all curses stopped, and several pairs of eyes shifted toward her. What? She innocently asked, as if she'd said nothing to justify those stares. But then, all recalled that it was Daphne, and immediately stopped caring. Meanwhile, within the Holy Flame Empire's Imperial Palace, the 7th, the 8th, and the 11th von Jurgen elders were having their blood essence siphoned by Adelar. Within his room, they hovered in the air with blood chains going straight from their hearts to his. All had fallen into a comatose state that prevented any scream from bypassing their lips. In silence, Adelar sat cross-legged and refined their blood essence, using it to polish the imperfections within his cultivation. The intensity of his aura incessantly rose, and following 3 days of refining, the 3 elders were sucked dry, turning into mummy-like corpses. The blood chains left their chests, and they tumbled onto the ground before vanishing in dust. Lawrence, who bore witness to this scene, couldn't stop shivering. You say our 9th brother returned? Why, yes. Using the token bestowed by Father, the 10th elder desperately fought to secure their escape and successfully brought him back. Lawrence replied to Adler's question. Hearing this, he sneered. Rubbish. I'm afraid our 10th elder no longer serves the von Jürgen banner. But it's fine. Gathering the blood fog surrounding him, Adelar stood up. Closing his eyes, he connected his soul to both his mind slaves and willing retainers. Dear servants, loyal retainers, the time has come for us to emerge from the shadows. On this day, I, Adelar von Jürgen, make my bid for the imperial throne. All those who answer to my will, gather, and alongside me, overthrow the fatuous ruler named Ulrich von Jürgen. The mental message spread through the minds of all Adler's followers within the imperial palace. And instantaneously, hundreds of light beams flew from various corners of the imperial palace to drop before Adler's chambers. Emotionlessly, he stepped out, and all dropped on their knees. Master, please lead us to free the country of Ulrich von Jürgen's tyranny. The head of the imperial guard exclaimed, and all others repeated after him. To the emperor's palace, Adelar roared, and alongside all his semi-saints and saint retainers, turned into a beam of light to shoot toward Ulrich's palace, where he currently was holding court with Conrad's avatar by his side. The Profane C dynasty's silent involvement has been causing us many issues. Should we? An official began, but at that time, a massive, gray lightning bolt descended from the sky and slammed the throne hall from above. The bolt struck the middle of the road separating the two rows of officials, triggering an explosion that sent them all flying against nearby walls. Arg! They wailed in agony. Both Conrad and Ulrich were startled. Bold! Who dares? Ulrich snapped and turned into a gray beam of light to shoot toward the sky. A voice thundered from the clouds. Immediately, the sky was corrupted by the appearance of gray and blood clouds. Alongside his troops, Adelar descended from the heavens, stopping before Ulrich with the hundreds of semi-saints and saints' slaves and turncoats by his side. Among them, Ulrich could name many elders, and even his imperial guard commander. His face contorted into a frown. Adelar, you finally can't hold back? Are you trying to force your father into abdication? Ulrich asked in a scornful yet level tone. His words seemed to cause no ripple on Adelar, who just eyed him with indifference. Abdication? No, father, I don't want your abdication. I loathe you too much for that. Today, I want two things. A, your throne. B, your life. But as he spoke, Adler's indifference was quickly cast aside to reveal soaring rage and hatred. However, unlike you, I don't want to seize my throne with an underhanded scheme. I must seize it in a flagrant, glaring, and flamboyant manner. Ulrich von Jürgen, dare you fight me? 1 against 1, man against man. If you have the gals, unsheath your sword and allow me to vent centuries of resentment. Adelar roared, and his vast holy force erupted alongside the words that resounded throughout the holy flame city. And in a flash, all knew that the second von Jürgen prince rebelled. Chapter 216 Ulrich's 6 Rules. The rumbling of Adler's voice alarmed the holy flame city's denizens, and all forces' attention fell onto the imperial palace. Saint-level experts locked their holy sense on the palace, eager to witness the events unfold. But strangely, as Adler's blood aura exploded alongside his holy force, though they could feel its tyrannical intensity, none could spot the demonic energy signature concealed within. Within the Holy Flame Church, the Dowager, Amalia Kvass, and the head exarch, Gerhard Herberger observed the scene from afar. Interesting. Never did I expect that the second prince concealed such formidable strength. I'm afraid that without the Holy Flame Seal's assistance, Ulrich is simply not his match. And even then, since he dares rebel, he must have some trump cards. We may very well welcome a new Holy Emperor today. Amalia, your descendants are truly outstanding. Gerhard appraised with an inexpressive look that gave no insight into his emotions. His eyes then turned toward Amalia, who stood silent at his left, her gaze cold and unfeeling. One is your son, the other is your grandson. Don't you wish to intervene? After all, only one can live to see the morrow. Gerhard asked. However, his voice seemed to provoke no reaction within Amelia's chilling face. Filial piety is the first virtue. Being unfilial, the first vice. He who aims his sword at his progenitor's neck should not exist in this world. Amalia coldly replied. Then with a sweep of her sleeve, she turned heels and vanished in a gray haze to return to secluded cultivation. From her words, Gerhard clearly understood that as far as she was concerned, the victor mattered not. Perhaps deep down, she even hoped they could both kill one another, or at the very least, that Ulrich perished at his son's hand. In the deepest recesses of the imperial palace, the top von Jürgen expert, Adelwin, sat cross-legged with his eyes shut close. Dazzling light swirled around his form, while faint star force brewed within his energy center. But as Adler's words echoed, Adelwin's ancient eyes opened, and his holy sense swept the scene. Seeing the contenders, no ripple flashed on his face, and ignoring the scene, he returned to the pursuit of star connection. Clearly, the previous emperor must be cursing his descendants from the netherworld. Or could this be the will of karma? Hubert wondered while observing the scene from afar. Adelar von Jürgen, please do the world a favor and remove that shit-stained father of yours from the face of the ancient crystal world. But while many were starting to bet on Adler's imminent victory, others remained skeptical. With her cultivation chambers, Else sat crossed-legged with her holy sense locked on the scene. Before her, another woman sat, legs crossed within an armchair. Conrad could effortlessly recognize her as Gulistan, his mother. Won't you intervene? After all, he's his grandson. Else asked Gulistan, who observed the distant scene with a smile. So what if he is? The daughter was crippled and expelled by her own father. Does such a grandfather still care about his grandson? Whether he even knows of his existence is a matter of debate. Gulistan replied with an amused smile. However, Else disagreed. But he's different from his mother, with the talent he shows. Should the news reach him, he's bound to care. True, but it has nothing to do with me. If our dear infernal cult leader wishes to save his grandson, even from the infernal cult's headquarters, he can still save him. Alas, the most defining traits of a perfect blood fiend are pride and callousness. Those who cannot showcase such traits will always be seen as defects. Facing Adler's tyrannical aura, Ulrich sighed and closed his eyes. Must it really come to this? For the sake of the throne, must the son rebel against the father? Is it always the way it has to be? Ulrich asked, and for some reason, feeling the profound sorrow in his words, Conrad, who observed the scene from the ground, felt his words genuine. But how could it be? Stretching out his hand, Ulrich summoned his holy energy sword. His eyes then returned onto Adelar, who sneered at his words. Did the fear of death make you muddled? How laughable! Don't you recall what you've taught me? Adelar stretched out his hand, causing vast blood fog to gather within his palm. Since you don't remember, allow me to remind you. Incomplete armament. The blood fog morphed into a crimson longsword within which faint cracks could be seen. Still, wielding it, Adler's aura rose to a new level. The sky turned red, and in a crimson beam, he shot toward Ulrich. With his eyes full of pain and sorrow, Ulrich turned into a gray light beam to meet his son's offensive. Clang! In a ringing sound, their swords collided. Alas, the might behind Adler's blow was too hard for Ulrich to bear, and with one move, he flew backward. From the moment I could read and write, you've taken care of my education, arguably giving it more priority than to Elmar, your crown prince. However, what you imparted onto us was completely different. And this what you taught me. Rule number 1. It's better for an emperor to be crooked than straight. Adelar roared, and not giving Ulrich any time to breathe, he raised his sword, causing blood clouds to merge into a 20 meters tall blood wolf that barreled into Ulrich's dropping form. Rule number 2. Your officials are either your pawns or your enemies. Before the blood wolf could smash into him, Ulrich summoned 6 gray circles, casting a 6th circle spell that filled the cloud with a gray thunderstorm. One massive lightning bolt descended, splitting the blood wolf in a resounding boom. Undisturbed, Adalar lowered his sword, and the mist formed by the wolf's destruction turned into dozens of larger wolves that bit Ulrich from all sides. Aarg! He groaned in pain while blood gushed from his mangled flesh. Rule number 3. Love is a felony. If you must love, love the weak. Love the helpless. Never love the mighty, or they shall be your doom. A massive conflagration erupted from Ulrich's bloodied form, returning the wolves to mist. But before he could steady himself, Adalar's sword drew a perfect arc, firing a 30 meters tall half-blood moon onto him. Rule number 4. Friendship is a cardinal sin. Number 5. Do not cherish your brothers, for one day you might find their swords at your back. Adalar roared in succession, while firing dozens upon dozens of half-moons. At first, Ulrich could barely shoulder it, but soon he became overwhelmed, and his body was torn by the myriad of sword slashes. Blood drenched his imperial robe, and as it dripped, his sorrow deepened. Last, but not the least, number 6. Greatness is defined by might and not righteousness. No one dares criticize the mighty, but all will trample on the feeble. Therefore, son, to become the greatest, you don't have to be good. You just have to be unrivaled. Those are all your words. Let's not even mention the enmity of slaying my helpless mother. Having raised me in such a manner, it would be strange if I didn't strive to butcher you. Your hypocrisy sickens me. 6 circle spell, Incarnadine C. Horizontally holding his sword, Adalar conjured 6 red circles from which a gargantuan blood sea erupted to flood all that lied below. Outmatched, Ulrich knew that should he fail to turn the tide, this move would be the last. With a wave of his hand, he summoned the Holy Flame Seal. Wielding it, his aura rose to a new level, and a sea of white flames formed above his head to meet Adalar's blood sea. The two forces canceled out, causing a massive explosion to propel the two parties backward. Stabilizing himself mid-flight, Ulrich again closed his eyes. Indeed, those are all my words, and you really are, my good son. And Conrad, who witnessed this scene, couldn't help but frown while a great sense of foreboding welled up within his chest. Within the Imperial Palace's cold quarter, recalling Conrad's words, Nils was currently rushing toward her brothers who sat cross-legged in confinement. With the chaos overtaking the Imperial Palace, no one cared to bear her path. Unblocked, she barged in, rapidly reached the area where the two remained and slammed the door to gain attention. Elder brother, I know you've reached the 9th step of the semi-holy rank. Since Father doesn't restrict your cultivation, nothing can stop you from escaping. So, escape, fast. Break out and lead Holger out of the Imperial Palace. Otherwise, we are all doomed to destruction. Chapter 2:17 Kill. 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 Nils' reasoning was simple. Although it seemed like Adalar held the absolute advantage, he was just building his own grave. There was no hope for victory. But to defeat him, her father would have to activate the worm and start his refining plans. Adalar would first perish. But what happened next? Once he started, would Ulrich stop? Could he stop? Those were questions that none could answer. And the thought of her brother's imminent demise led her to his gate. Alas, nothing she said could convince Elmar from coming out of confinement. And Nils knew very well that even if she revealed the soul worms, Elmar would never believe her. To say nothing of him, if she'd not witnessed it with her own eyes, Nils could never believe it. Though the Holy Flame Seal had caused the intensity of Ulrich's aura to skyrocket, Adalar remained undisturbed. The Holy Flame Seal turned into a bright white meteor and flew toward Adalar, crazily expanding while approaching him. Foolish, I have obtained the inheritance of a sage. Do you think I lack high-grade holy artifacts? Adalar scoffed and summoned a bronze spear which he hurled at the Holy Flame Seal. Bang! The spear slammed into the seal and sent it spiraling into the ground in a deafening crash. Over. It's over. Those were the words that circled within most of the onlookers' minds. If even the seal could not turn the tide, Ulrich was finished. 210 years, 6 months, and 23 days ago, my bloodline awoke. And on that day, you used false charges to execute my mother. She was just a cripple, a helpless cripple whose meridians and energy center had been ruined beyond repair. Today I must ask why. Adelar screamed, but Ulrich merely shook his head and again closed his eyes. Since you and I have already reached this step, additional words serve no purpose. Make your move. Well said. The bronze spear returned to Adelar's space bracelet, and he aimed his incomplete fiend armament at Ulrich's neck. That being the case, farewell, father. With a vast array of blood fog propelling him, Adelar descended upon Ulrich for a final sword swing. Seeing Ulrich's closed eyes, and the rapid move that those beneath the true origin saint rank couldn't even appraise, the onlookers concluded that the battle had come to an end. But as Adelar's sword slash approached his father's neck, a shocking scene occurred. For an imperceptible split of a second, his sword stopped. Ulrich sidestepped. The swing went wide, and with his eyes still shut close, Ulrich drove his holy sword through Adelar's abdomen, skewering him midair. Pooh! Blood gushed from Adelar's lips, stomach, and back while his eyes went bloodshot in a stupor that echoed with all the onlookers. What the hell just happened? He was obviously about to take Ulrich's life. Why did his sword suddenly vacillate? Both Hubert and Gerhard wondered in shock. Of the onlookers, they were some of the few that clearly saw what occurred. Could Adelar have turned soft a step before taking his father's life? Impossible. And yet, this was precisely what seemed to have occurred. How can this be dash? Adelar stammered while his entire body shivered, not from Ulrich's blow, but from a horrendous pain that suddenly jolted from his body and paralyzed him for that split of a second. And while his blood incessantly flowed, within his mind, his soul world collapsed, revealing an identical one at the base of which a gigantic worm crawled. Instantly, Adelar realized the ploy. Alas, it was far too late. Gently patting the back of Adelar's head, Ulrich brought him back into the crumbling throne room. In this life, you're my greatest accomplishment, my greatest pride and joy. Since you were born, you never disappointed me. And from all the children I cherish, without a shred of doubt, you're my most beloved. A pity that what I love, I must destroy. A pity that what I cherish, by my hand must be extinguished. My Tao is heartlessness, love, my tribulation. Since you so desperately want to know the real reason for your mother's death, allow me to grant you this last wish. Ulrich's eyes opened, and from the left, warm tears incessantly dropped. Revenge is the greatest drive. I used her to set you on the path of revenge, to force you into surpassing the limitations of birth and seek chances that would allow you to magnify your potential, all to devour you. Ulrich whispered in Adelar's ear, causing a new wave of enlightenment to flash within his mind. But that's only the first reason. The second one is that I knew that among all those I picked, only you could make me falter. We knew, that if you didn't rebel, I couldn't kill you. Thank you, my beloved child. While he spoke, Ulrich's voice trembled and his left eye shone with struggles. However, the right one remained utterly unmoved. Ha! So, that's how it is, to think that I believed myself clever when from the moment I appeared in this world, I played within your palm? Although Adelar possessed profound soul powers, examining one's soul was a daunting task. It was the same logic as performing self-surgery. No matter how skilled, it was suicidal. If Ulrich attempted to infect him with a soul worm today, he could send him flying while keeping his hands crossed beneath his back. A pity that the moment Ulrich first held him in his arms was the time he picked to plant the worm. But even though he knew himself vanquished, Adelar felt no sorrow. Because while Ulrich whispered into his ears, his eyes locked on Conrad, who stood several steps behind. And Conrad, who shouldered his gaze, couldn't help but feel that the eyes told him, "Hurry up, your time has come." But before he could think further, Ulrich pulled out his sword from Adler's bowels and let him fall on his knees. "Thank you and farewell." Dispelling his sword, Ulrich placed his hand on Adler's forehead and started the refining process. Though he could feel his cultivation, soul, and life force leaving him, though the worm made him helpless before his demise, Adler smiled. "Father, for the sake of supreme power, across centuries you have toyed with your relatives and loved ones. As a power-hungry monster, I can't blame you, but knowing that a son will overthrow your rule and take your life, I die without regrets. Still, if you think the soul of Adler is that easy to digest, think again. Allow me to help you. Into destruction." Adler's body collapsed in red and gray light that flew toward Ulrich's mind, but seeing the demented look within his eyes, Conrad couldn't help but think he played one last trick. And indeed, within Ulrich's soul, the maddened laughter of Adler echoed, joining the infernal souls to spur Ulrich onward. Kill, kill, kill. The time has come for Ulrich von Jürgen's ascension. Hesitate no longer. Verena, Else, Elmar, Nils, Amalia, all should perish and fuel our growth. Kill, kill. The words boomed within Ulrich's mind. With eyes wide open, he staggered and grabbed his head within his hands, clenching tightly as veins beat on his temple. "No, no. Arg." Ulrich groaned in agony. At the same, his cultivation skyrocketed, going from the peak of the true origin saint rank to the peak stage of the fate wrestling saint rank. Moreover, the intensity of his aura rivaled that of crossed tribulation saints. "Father, why did you kill me? Since you killed me, why not kill them? No need to wait further. The process is triggered, your ascension dawns." "No, you're a rebel, a traitor. I didn't want to kill you. Why would I want to kill you? You forced my hand. Why did you have to, rebel? Why? Traitor, unfilial, traitor. You killed your father, killed your brothers. You deserve to die. Where am I? Who am I?" Arg. The remnants of Adler's soul not only fueled the infernal souls, but also awoke the lingering consciousness of the true Ulrich who thrashed against their joint oppression. With a succession of guttural howls, he collapsed on the floor, leaving a baffled Conrad as the sole conscious person within the room. What the hell is going on? Conrad, who wasn't privy to Ulrich's soul, wondered. But before he could probe deeper, Ulrich regained consciousness, his eyes clear, and his lips curling into a smile. Meanwhile, following Adler's demise, his mind slaves dropped on the ground, unconscious, but their freedom restored. As for the true turncoats, they were running for their lives. Ulrich turned into a light beam and in a flash, beheaded them all. Their blood drenched the holy flame city's sky while their corpses dropped onto the ground. Ignoring the unconscious folks, Ulrich returned to the crumbling throne room to collect the artifacts within Adler's space treasure, then tossed the bracelet toward Conrad. "If you find anything to your liking, feel free to take it." And not waiting for Conrad's reaction, he vanished from the scene. Chapter 2:18 Believe in Me. Following Ulrich's departure, Conrad's eyes contorted into a frown. The current Ulrich was even harder to comprehend, and whatever Adler last did to him clearly drove him into another bout of madness. Was it over, or was trouble just beginning? The main body has already left secluded cultivation and is on his way to the Tower of Rebirth. The tower is at the border between the barbarian continent and the holy continent. Even if he turned heels, if Ulrich wants to kill someone, he can probably do it before his return. Moreover, if it was before his fight with Adler, Conrad had confidence that he could defeat Ulrich. While it would force him to reveal his origins, at least, that confidence remained. But now, although Ulrich's cultivation had just risen to the peak stage fate wrestling saint, the intensity of his aura didn't lose out to the head exarchs, the peak stage cross-tribulation Saint Gerhard. Before his return from the tower, Conrad couldn't face him. With Yvonne still being in the palace, The thought of letting a crazed Ulrich run amok was hard to digest. How could Adalar use demonic energy without showing the signature? Conrad wondered. Although the transformation skill allowed him to conceal his true blood and pass as human, not all infernal races possessed such an ability. At least, blood fiends didn't. And even then, once he released his demonic powers, he couldn't hide his true nature. The same was true for everyone. Must be an artifact, he concluded following a small assessment and lowered his eyes onto Adalar's space bracelet. Browsing it, he ignored whatever wealth it possessed to seek the item he required. And as his eyes laid on a topaz ring, he knew he hit the spot. Gotcha! Kron. In a purple haze, Kron appeared before him. Master! Without delay, Conrad tossed the ring toward him. Stealthily bring this to Yvonne and tell her that should anything happen, she must go all out to leave the Imperial Palace. We will take of the rest. As you command, Master. Using the invisibility skill, Kron vanished and shot toward Yvonne's palace. The situation is disastrous. Ulrich broke through and refined Adalar's foundation while Adalwin borders a breakthrough into the star connecting Saint Rank. At this juncture, we can only hope that old hatreds pin them against one another. Otherwise, hurry. I must hurry. Determination blazed within Conrad's eyes, and at that time, the main body had finally reached the Tower of Rebirth. Alongside Yvonne's pure self and the Nine Ladies, Conrad left the Profound Sea Dynasty for the Tower of Rebirth. Following the closed-door session, his cultivation had not only broken through the 9th step of the Transcendent Knight rank, but also pursued the Semi-Holy Knight rank, thus reaching the limits in both the martial and spiritual paths. With his half-step semi-saint cultivation, resources, physiques, soul, and formidable bloodline powers, he had full confidence to fight his way to the tower's summit. On this trip, he only wanted one thing. Everything. To completely empty the tower and leave nothing for the wearing forces. Meanwhile, the girls had various levels of improvement. Lena reached the 9th step of the semi-holy rank. Zamira also reached the peak of the semi-holy rank. The rest rose to the peak of the transcendent rank, all with new bloodlines and stronger physiques. Zamira's case was unique. After all, she'd been cultivating for more than 2 centuries and had a clear understanding of herself and the road she pursued. Therefore, her sublimations were simple, and she could just use Conrad's juice to break through. As for Lena, she was a 6th-step semi-saint, to begin with. In the distance, a gargantuan black and white tower piercing the vault of heaven stood. To say nothing of its suffocating length, even in width, the tower occupied dozens of square miles, painting a startling picture that would make the faint-hearted collapse from awe. How did they possibly build such a thing? Jasmine asked as they approached the entrance, speaking the words that echoed in the others' minds. The founders were at the peak of divine ascension, infinitely close to godhood. Moreover, their backgrounds and foundations were earth-shaking. For them, this probably didn't require much effort. Yvonne replied, then turned toward Conrad. In his eyes, hesitation clearly brewed. Don't worry. Thanks to the item Kron delivered, I can freely use my lineage weapon. At the very least, I have full confidence that no one can stop me from leaving. She reassured with her lips curled into a smile. You've just returned to the peak of the profound saint rank. Although your battle power is earth-shaking and only loses out to me, the opponents are not pushovers either. Moreover, strenuous fights will delay your recovery. How can I not worry? Conrad's eyes contorted into a frown. How about this? We rush back now, so that our true bodies can join hands against the enemies. Although it will be a desperate battle, the odds are not necessarily against us. As long as we go all out and make the first move, we can kill Adalwin before he breaks through, then kill Ulrich. In any case, the tower is not going anywhere. Conrad hurriedly said, and seeing the stark difference in treatment, the ladies had various reactions. Lena and Astarte, who'd yet to see Conrad show worries, were startled. Zamira, who understood the nature of their relationship, didn't care. Thinking that their master had yet to turn into a complete monster, Phaedra and Aliki were relieved. Daphne found it endearing. Freya was disgruntled. Meanwhile, Jasmine and Ileana felt various degrees of jealousy. Although they'd seen Conrad go all out for them before, he always did it with a rational mind, and never knowingly threw himself into situations he couldn't control. But this was precisely what he now intended to do. Although they were slowly getting used to the difference in status and grew to accept Yvonne's lead, they couldn't help but feel bitterness and sorrow. Jasmine especially found it hard to digest. The knowledge that though she was the first, she wouldn't be the last, filling her with pain. But while she clenched her fist till her nails dug blood, Yvonne made a simple gesture. Balling up her right fist, she extended it toward Conrad. "Don't be daft and believe in me." Upon hearing those words, Conrad pulled in a deep breath, and his determination returned. Indeed, since she was his chosen wife, he should, at the very least, have faith in her. In any case, his avatar was making preparations. Like Yvonne, he balled up his fist. Defeat is not an option. They said in tandem, then bumped fists, releasing a vast energy wave that caused tremors throughout the ground. Yvonne then vanished in a twister of dark sand, the pure self returning to the true self. 1 month for me, several years for you. I will be expecting your startling growth and glorious return. At that time, let's sweep aside all foes and put the holy continent on its knees. Yvonne's voice echoed in Conrad's mind. For an instant, he closed his eyes, letting the words sink in, before turning to the tower's entrance. Let's go. Meanwhile, within Elsa's cultivation chamber, Gulistan perused the imperial palace with her divine sense. Oh, interesting. The Holy Empress life standard seems to be reaching an end. Gulistan said with an amused smile. After that, I guess it will be your turn. Little kitty, since you refuse to serve me, I'm afraid this time, you'll have to rely on yourself. A mild chuckle escaped Gulistan's lips as she shifted her attention back onto Else. But seeing that no ripple flashed on her face, she was a tad bit disappointed. That name is too intimate for us, don't you think? Else asked in a level tone. Oh, Conrad's privilege? At this juncture, those are really not the words you should be speaking. But I'm in an extraordinarily good mood, so I will give you some good fortune. Gulistan waved her hand, causing 3 identical pills to appear and fly toward Else. Each pill can seal a soul worm. Although it won't be removed, Ulrich also won't be able to activate or control them. As for the rest, that will depend on you. I'm eager to see how well or how poorly you'll fare. Ha 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 ha. And in a twister of light, Gulistan vanished from Elsa's quarters. Chapter 219 Hell's Reach. In a gray light beam, Ulrich reappeared in Verina's quarters, hovering in the air with his aura unconstrained. Shivering in fright, the eunuchs and maids all dropped on the ground, unable to utter a word. And as the clattering of their teeth echoed, in a gray beam, Verina arrived. Mid-air, she stopped before Ulrich, her silver eyes staring directly into his. Your Majesty, to what do I owe such an overbearing visit? She asked, her tone showcasing a mild confusion. My beloved Holy Empress, where were you when my traitorous son rebelled? Ulrich asked, his lips still flashing the same smile he'd given Conrad. Oh, here, of course. Could the son you personally raised possibly threaten you? Impossible. And I know your Majesty wouldn't want me to get hurt in the crossfire, so I could only wait for the good news. Verina began. However, feeling the fate power rippling from Ulrich's form, she gave a congratulatory bow. Congratulations, Your Majesty, for breaking through the fate wrestling saint rank. You're not wondering why my cultivation has reached this level? Why should I care? Verina replied to Ulrich's inquiry, causing him to burst into laughter. Good, very good. You truly are my good wife. All these years, I've not loved you in vain. Alas, today, for the sake of the imperial family's growth and prosperity, I must ask you to forsake yourself and sacrifice your life. Verina, are you willing? Hearing this, Verena's lips curled into a smile. "So, my time has come?" she asked, undisturbed. Her words allowing Ulrich to realize she was now aware of the entirety of his ploy. "Indeed. But don't worry, you are not vanishing from this world. You're joining me, throughout eternity. Our union shall outlast heaven and earth, for you will always be within me." Ulrich proclaimed and activated the soul worm. Instantly, Verena's false soul world collapsed to reveal the awakened worm that now crawled within the real soul world. As soon as it rose, Verena lost all control of her body, limply dropping onto the ground like a lifeless puppet. Seeing this, the eunuchs and maids were all alarmed. "Your Majesty!" they roared, and many tried to rush to her aid. But with a wave of his hand, Ulrich turned them all into ashes, then landed before Verena, who knelt with glazed eyes on the ground. 387 years of conjugal bonds. You were but a girl when we got married, and at that time, deep within your eyes, genuine affection existed. But although I knew that you've long since stopped loving me, that deep down, you even scorn me, I have never mistreated you. Do you think I don't know that 300 years ago, you started taking fertility medicines to make sure you wouldn't bear me children? Still, I never said anything, even removing all the spies and threats by your side to grant you true freedom. Wenzel's mother tried to poison you, so I killed her. For those 387 years, Verena, I loved you the best I could, and dare say that no empress has ever been more cherished than you." Ulrich muttered with his eyes shut. He then extended his hand toward Verena, causing her body to fly toward him, and clasped her forehead within his palm. "A pity that what I love, I must destroy. A shame that your death is a necessity for my rise. So please, my beloved, die, and join me in true union, for eternity." Ulrich's eyes opened, and within, dementia clearly blazed. But at that time, a limpid river bloated the sky and descended upon him. Pushing Verena aside, Ulrich aimed his hands at the transparent river, causing dozens of massive lightning bolts to hammer it from above. Boom! The river collapsed, revealing a crimson-dressed, unparalleled beauty who leisurely hovered within the air while her ink-like hairs cascaded at her back. If not else, who could it be? And within her right hand, she held a cracked silver mirror that rippled with the power of time. Else waved her hand, and Verena vanished to appear by her side. Without delay, she shoved one of Guliston's pills into her mouth. The pill's effect immediately kicked in, trapping the soul worm in a golden cage. Awareness returned to Verena's eyes, and she regained her balance, standing by Elsa's side with a complicated look. "I didn't expect that at this juncture, you'd show up. Don't misunderstand. I don't care about your life and death. However, someone is bound to care. For that someone, I must show up." Elsa motionlessly replied, causing Verena's lips to curl into a smile. Their eyes then returned onto Ulrich, who remained undisturbed. "Why you choose to stand up for Verena, I don't know. But since you appear at this juncture, you must know my aim. Do you really think that relying on an incomplete divine artifact, you can stop me? Let's not even mention the toll it will take on you. Even if it brought you no harm, you'd still fail to contend with me," Ulrich declared, and though she wished to disagree, Else was forced to admit that his words were facts. Having inherited Adler's foundation and net worth, Ulrich no longer feared anyone within the secular world. This was a hopeless battle. But at that time, though the sun still hanged high in the heavens, the sky darkened, overtaken by a massive wave of darkness that spread throughout the holy flame city, and alongside it, bringing a vast, terrible aura that many ancient cultivators could recognize at a glance. Feeling it, Ulrich shivered, and his eyes widened in stupor. No, it can't be. Why would she, and the aura, the intensity, know? But alas, heaven disagreed with Ulrich, and within the sky, a figure dropped. Unmatched sex appeal, tyrannical martial air, and killing intent swirled around the Hessenite-eyed beauty that landed before Verena and Else. They can't contend with you, but what about me? Although the eyes had changed color, The voice always echoed within Ulrich's mind with one name. Yvonne Voigt. How could this be? Your cultivation is restored? Ulrich frowned, but then he realized the mistake. No, it is in the process of being restored. Right now, you're just at the peak of the profound saint rank. Even if your strength goes against heaven's will, you cannot oppose me. Ulrich roared while rising into the air to face the female trio. In the past, the peak stage true origin Saint Yvonne was evenly matched with the peak cross-tribulation Saint Adelwin. Today's Ulrich didn't lose out to the Adelwin of that time. Therefore, he was unafraid. However, rage flared in his eyes. Who was it? Who played tricks against him and managed to free Yvonne of her poison? Who tampered with his possession? Why were three women without connections suddenly standing side by side? Who was to blame? Answer. He needed an answer. And as if reading through his mind, Verena replied, a man, of course. The most outstanding man under the heavens, with bedchamber skills you can only dream of. I've lost counts of how many times he filled me with his delightful spunk. Following Verena's shameless words, Yvonne nodded. Well said. Indeed, an outstanding man binds us. As for whether I can oppose you or not, let's find out. Awaken and drown my enemies in inferno. Hell's reach. In a shocking storm of black flames and dark sand, a pitch-black spear around which a serpent coiled appeared and fell into Yvonne's hand. This was her lineage weapon, Hell's Reach. Wielding it, the intensity of Yvonne's aura skyrocketed, and with her wind-blown hairs dancing at her back, she looked like the incarnation of a war goddess. And feeling this earth-shaking might, Ulrich trembled. Still, it wasn't enough for him to back off. And following their words, how could he ever retreat? Cheated, cuckolded, robbed blind. He'd been robbed blind. But as his rage, rancor, and indignation reached a breaking point, a foreign male voice boomed within his head. Ulrich von Jürgen, I have taken all your children captive. If you don't back off, I will kill them all, forever barring you from the supremacy you seek. Try me if you dare. Chapter 220. When heaven wants to destroy you, it first drives you mad. Following Ulrich's bout of madness, the first thing Conrad did was to have Kron bring Adler's essence concealing ring to Yvonne. The second one was to secure Nils and take all of Ulrich's children into captivity. The reason was simple. Attempting to take all of the women away, one after the other, was a pipe dream. He could only rely on Yvonne to buy time while setting up a foolproof plan. Of his 9 children, there were 2 Ulrich couldn't afford to lose, Nils and Elmar. If they died, it had to be by his hand. As for the 5 that now remained, while Conrad realized that their lives mattered not, he could use their deaths to showcase his seriousness. Kron currently held them all and used flesh transformation to have 3 helpless eunuchs assume the shape of Nils, Elmar, and Holger. The real ones were pocketed. If need be, they would first kill the real princes to cover for the false ones. In any case, Holger was Conrad's servant. Killing him was redundant, while Elmar was a talent with sizable future achievements. With the right resources, he could at least become a sage. Subduing him was more valuable. As for Nils, was that even a question? Meanwhile, he'd contacted Wolfgang and had him deliver one of their last, cutting-edge products to Hubert. Even if Ulrich were sufficiently crazed to forsake the life of his children, as long as Hubert could refine the product in time, the von Jürgen would be forced to back off. And indeed, Ulrich floundered, though rage still seethed within his veins, when his holy sense swept the imperial palace, and he realized his 7 remaining children had all disappeared. His eyes went wide with fright. Nils, Elmar, damnable. Moreover, although Clemens can't be killed, if his abilities are revealed, the captor will never let him go. Clemens von Jürgen was the sickly 8th prince. Born with a congenital disease that kept him bedridden, to the world, he was known as the von Jürgen tragedy. After all, even the average cultivator's house would rarely, if ever, see a sickly infant, to say nothing of the imperial family. In their 100,000 years of history, Clemens was the only such case. And while his disease was no fabrication, It stemmed from a cause Ulrich kept hidden from the world. The eighth prince, Clemens, possessed a 1 in a billion holy physique. That physique made him unable to cultivate and acted as a congenital lung disease. But at the same, it gave him an unparalleled ability. Beneath the divine seed rank, absolutely no one could injure him, and all blows would return to the sender. Although his physique was currently just at the holy rank, throughout the 3 realms, it was one of the most dreadful and classified among the 3 forbidden physiques. Those 3 physiques could not be inherited, and because of their horrifying after effects, many viewed them as nature's curse. But Ulrich saw it as a blessing in disguise. As long as he could find a way to absorb the physique without the after effects and upgrade its rank, in the future, who could rival him? For that reason, the 8th prince remained in close custody, protected by a carefully selected group of loyal retainers. His mother was also killed to protect the secret. Never did he expect that while he faced those traitorous sluts, someone would rob him. It has to be the same person. It must be that man. No mistake is allowed. Retreat. I must retreat. Ulrich resolved. But at that time, Adler's voice echoed. Why hesitate? Why falter? Because of a few insignificant sacrifices? At that time, Ulrich could see Adler standing before him. Naturally, Yvonne, Else, and Verena couldn't. This was a product of his imagination. Without them, our rise? Ulrich began, but before he could carry on, Adler interrupted. Nonsensical, he jeered, then vanished to reappear at Ulrich's right. Don't you see the truth yet? The truth you've been hiding from yourself? No? All right, allow me to enlighten you. Adler placed a reassuring hand on Ulrich's shoulder, then carried on. They are worthless. Having refined me, having obtained my foundation, besides a fast cultivation breakthrough, there isn't much you can gain from them. Or is it that you think the talent and foundation boost you'll receive from them can equal even a fraction of what you gained from me? Maybe else can be significant, but for the rest, no, that's impossible. Ulrich replied with dazed eyes, his words causing confusion within the ladies before him. Good. They are merely side dishes and completely expendable. Because from the start, your thinking was erroneous. Adler exclaimed with crazed eyes that mirrored Ulrich's. And out of nowhere, a second Adler appeared at Ulrich's left. What is it that you treasure most? What is your most valuable and beloved possession? Speak true. My empire, Ulrich replied with vacant eyes and the same dazed tone. Hearing this, the 2 Adler's smiles broadened, and they clenched tightly on Ulrich's shoulders, or so he felt. Right. From the start, the thing you love most is, and always will be, your empire. And as a wise ruler, you understand that the people are the empire. You know, better than anyone, that the 14 billion of commoners and servants stretching across your vast land are the motors of your country. Through them, you're the holy continent's most exalted ruler. Without them, there is no empire whatsoever. That is why you often give tax exemption and reduce their burdens while antagonizing the nobility. The nobles may see you as a ruthless tyrant hiding under a fair countenance, but to the commoners, you are benevolence. You're correct. That is why, only by refining them all, can you reach perfection. Only by refining the empire you so cherish and sacrificing its billions of citizens, can you truly reach the apex of your cultivation method. Compared to them, those people are insignificant and can be killed at will. Adler's voice thundered in Ulrich's mind, and a third appeared at his back, hovering above his head. Kill them all. Then start constructing a grand refining formation across the Holy Flame Empire with the capital as its epicenter. When it is complete, refine all the commoners, refine your empire, and become supreme. In the future, like our ancestor, you can build a new one. The 3 whispered in Ulrich's ears, and his eyes shone with crazed enlightenment. Of course, why did I never think of this? You're right. We're right. The truth was always before us, but we kept setting it aside. Before our empire, before our citizens, what do any of them count as? Nothing. This is the real sacrifice. Ulrich roared, causing a new wave of confusion to spread within the three ladies. Kill if you must. To perish for us is their glory. Ulrich bellowed with his arms outstretched, and instantly, Conrad knew the bet lost. Since they no longer served any purpose, Conrad had the useless von Jürgen princes beheaded by Kron. However, when the sickly 8th prince's turn arrived, clang, the blow rebounded against his neck, and Kron flew backward with a blood spurt. Fortunately, since he'd not employed much strength, the damage was negligible. Master, that 8th prince possesses a might reversal physique, at the very least, of the holy rank. Meanwhile, Ulrich summoned 2 spears, 1 bronze, 1 silver, around which massive holy force and gray spiritual mist swirled. They were both 9 stars holy artifacts, thus ranking among the most powerful artifacts of the holy rank. Wielding them, the intensity of his aura skyrocketed, and he faced Yvonne without fear. Since you won't belong to us, you might as well not exist in this world. The 8th von Jürgen prince was briefly mentioned as sickly and bedridden in the chapter Ulrich introduces Conrad to the imperial family. Chapter 221 Broken Myth. Even a fool could see that Ulrich's insanity had reached its final stage. Now, no one, not even Conrad, could fathom what erratic move he would resort to. But that mattered not. Hell's reach in hand, throughout the secular world, Yvonne feared none. Around her, the storm of black flames and dark sand intensified, while at her back, Verena and Els stood ready to use their life force to activate the divine mirror, if need be. Eararg, Ulrich howled and assumed his true spirit form, causing his aura to rise to a new level, and the gray fog whirlwind around him to stretch across dozens of meters. His aura alarmed all the Holy Flame City's forces, and many failed to comprehend where that might hailed from. However, the more astute were starting to see the light. Adelar fell, and Ulrich rose. The implications were clear. In a gray light meteor, Ulrich barreled into Yvonne, who met his assault with an ear-splitting sweep of her spear. Bang! The two recoiled from the impact, but in a fraction of a second, stabilized themselves in the air. Controlled by his holy sense, the silver spear in Ulrich's hand turned into a gray ray and flew toward Yvonne, seeking to create openings where none lied beforehand. Meanwhile, in a masterful display of soul power and spellcasting, Ulrich summoned 18 magic circles within the air. 6 circle spell, Thunderstorm. 6 circle spell, Searing Sky. 6 circle spell, Incarnadine Blood Sea. The sky became a strange mixture of gray and red. A deluge of massive gray lightning bolts and bright red flames then dropped from the clouds to indiscriminately hammer Yvonne, Els, and Verena. Meanwhile, a blood sea appeared above Ulrich's head and still flew toward them. The 3 spells might seem unstoppable, but Yvonne was undaunted. The black firestorm and dark sand swirling around her flew to meet the spells above, while she aimed her spear at the blood sea. Overlord's might. The air shivered, and while the force wasn't aimed at them, even Els and Verena were forced to recoil. In that instant, they had a misconception. Yvonne was no longer a mortal, but a supreme overlord descended from the higher realm to step on the ancient crystal world. Her entire body overflowed with a formless might and pressure that imbued even the tiniest moves with inestimable force. Without hesitation, she drove her spear in a frontal thrust. A simple, straightforward move that split the blood sea into 2 halves which then collapsed in droplets of blood. But she was just getting started. Suppression. Primal force. The 2 invisible forces slammed into Ulrich, shackling his moves and causing the intensity of his aura to plummet at breakneck speed. At the same time, golden primal light erupted and surrounded Yvonne's form. Yvonne vanished, reappearing before Ulrich. Her lineage weapon, Hell's Reach, descended, aiming at his neck. Battling the suppression force, he raised his spears to meet her slash. The weapons met, and Ulrich flew backward with his internal organs trembling. Yvonne pursued, chasing him wherever he attempted to stabilize himself with a flurry of ferocious spear thrusts. In a flash, they exchanged dozens of moves before Ulrich's arms wavered, and she sent a kick straight into his jaw. With a sizable blood spurt, he spiraled into the air, dropping like a fly. Both Verena and Else were startled. Ulrich even more. Absurd. Her strength was utterly absurd. Ulrich, for centuries you have threaded the Tao of heartlessness. Good for you. But what is heartlessness before invincibility? Yvonne rhetorically asked, then aimed her spear at the still dropping Ulrich. From its tip, a gargantuan hurricane of black flames and sand erupted, shooting toward him. In that instant, even Else believed Ulrich would meet his maker. Alas, she'd underestimated his current net worth. Ulrich waved his hand, summoning a bronze shield around which vast divine force swirled. The bronze shield expended, reaching 100 meters in radius, and barreled into the infernal hurricane, ending its assault before carrying on toward Yvonne. A one-star divine artifact, Yvonne frowned and gathered all her strength for her life's mightiest strike. Veins beat on her hands and temple while the black flames and sand shrunk to coil around her spear. Hell's Reach whistled in the air before meeting the divine shield in an earth-shaking boom. Houses collapsed, the commoners wailed, and the holy flame city quaked. But, at least, the blow was averted. Both Yvonne and the shield flew backward. But while no cracks appeared on its surface, blood trickled down Yvonne's lips. Ulrich rose back in the air, standing beside the shield with bloodshot eyes. For how long do you think you can withstand its might? For how long do you think you can endure a divine artifact's toll? Yvonne leisurely snarked in reply to Ulrich's snide. Meanwhile, Else and Verena channeled both their holy force and life force to deal Ulrich devastating blows during the next assault. Although they couldn't fire many before collapsing, it would be more than enough to turn the tide and bring Yvonne victory. Meanwhile, within the depths of the imperial palace, Adelwin's ancient eyes opened, and his holy sense locked on the scene playing above his house. If before a complete restoration, her strength is already this dreadful, once she completely recovers, who will save my house? Strange, what kind of weapon does she wield for her might to rise to such a level? If I didn't know better, I would say a lineage weapon. But how could it be? Adelwin wondered while standing up from his cross-legged meditation. But now, I suppose it matters not. He sighed. Father, eldest brother, I'm old, and only have a few centuries left to live. Soon, very soon, I will join you. Alas, our descendants are unfilial and threaten to bring our house to ruin. But as long as I, Adelwin, stands, none can threaten the name von Jürgen. And with these last centuries, I pledge to clean all our enemies and leave an unshakable foundation. Suddenly, Adelwin's calm, ancient eyes rippled with unprecedented vigor and determination. He stretched out his hand, aiming it at the distant sky, but his eyes went beyond. You who answered my call, accept my reaching hand and become my first star. All phenomenon within the holy flame city's sky vanished, and again, clarity returned. But within that clear sky, a dazzling blue star now glittered. That star fired a beam toward a secluded spot of the imperial palace, a beam fired at Adelwin. He didn't evade, bathing in the starlight that transformed his body and allowed him to complete his lifelong aspiration. Though he only had a few centuries left to live, though his existence approached its end, he succeeded. He broke through. After 100,000 years, without the help of the celestial church, the secular world's first star-connecting saint finally appeared, and it was him, Adelwin. The myth that no secular world cultivator could ever reach the star-taming stage was finally broken. With a step, he vanished, and with starlight still shrouding him, he reappeared by Ulrich's side, releasing a pressure that caused the entire city to shiver. You broke through, Ulrich stated, without a hint of joy, speaking the words that echoed in the minds of the Holy Flame City's top experts. Adelwin ignored him, shifting his attention onto Yvonne. Without a shred of doubt, you're this world's #1 prodigy. As a cultivator, I can't help but marvel at your talent. But as a son, I must protect my father's inheritance. As a brother, I must shelter my brother's descendants. And as an imperial prince, I must defend the imperial family's prosperity and glory. Anyone who threatens this, no matter how much I appreciate them, must perish. While Adelwin's hands remained crossed at his back, the pressure created by the blue star force swirling around him was enough to suppress all dissidents. The wind had again shifted, and this time, there seemed to be no hope for survival. But when all seemed lost, besides Adelwin's blue star, a pitch-black one appeared. Its darkness challenging Adelwin's star, as if representing all he opposed. That dark star fired a ray onto another spot of the holy flame city, and from that spot, a shadow rose. But this time, it wasn't that of a man, but a 300 meters long pitch-black serpent with a wingspan of more than 700 meters. Around that winged serpent, dark star force swirled. That monstrous beast whose body bloated the sky was none other than Hubert Voigt, Yvonne's father, in his true form. And thanks to Wolfgang's express delivery, he'd also broken through. Chapter 222 Compromise. The lack of star connection pills was the primary reason why, in 100,000 years of history, no one in the secular world ever managed to reach the star-connecting saint rank. While it wasn't impossible without, it required earth-shaking talent and profound enlightenment. In his youth, Adelwin was both the youngest and the most outstanding prince of his generation. Having passed the Celestial Church's examination, he left the secular world to study there for several centuries. Alas, several centuries after taking his throne, his eldest brother perished while trying to cross a fate tribulation, thus leaving the house defenseless. Without another choice, Adelwin returned to protect the next generation, his nephew, Ulrich's grandfather, hence destroying his own future. Since he planned to form an invincible battalion to sweep aside the mortal world's forces, among the recipes he periodically sent Wolfgang, Conrad included the star connection pill. After gathering the resources, the Cracked took care of the refining. With the first batch ready, Conrad intended to save the pills and build a reserve for both his harem and servants. Never did he expect that the situation would take such a turn. And since things reached this point, he had Wolfgang bring one to Hubert, who refined it without delay. In his massive winged serpent form, Hubert hovered above the gathering below. Seeing the dark star force swirling around him, Verena heaved a sigh of relief while Yvonne's lips curled into a smile. As for Else, she showed no emotion. Meanwhile, both Ulrich and Adelwin's faces distorted. These were terrible news. The situation had once again been reversed, and now, with Yvonne and her father standing side by side, they were back at a disadvantage. Unfilial daughter, long time no see. Old man, I'd say I missed you, but that's a naked lie. Old your mother. I'm just reaching my middle ages and still have more than 5,000 years to live. Actually, mother is. Silence. The two exchanged with Hubert's voice booming in the air. His slit, silver eyes then fell upon the von Jürgen duo. Opening his maw, Hubert condensed a large black orb of star force before firing a dark star beam toward the duo. Undisturbed, Adelwin raised his hand, firing a blue star beam which collided with Hubert's ray. The beams met in an earth-shaking explosion of star force that distorted the air and caused an earthquake to overwhelm the holy flame city. With just that one collision, houses collapsed in the hundreds, and helpless commoners died in the thousands. Hubert didn't care. However, Adelwin frowned. If their fight carried on, regardless of the result, the holy flame city was doomed to destruction. Shit-stain, dog emperor, you truly stop at no evil. Your father wasn't enough, you also had to plot against your own son. Do you think people are stupid enough to not realize you played tricks against Adelar, all for the sake of wresting his powers? Once we start investigating the origin of your cultivation growth, do you dare say your house doesn't face extermination? Hubert's voice thundered within the holy flame city, and at that time, 2 additional beams of light flew from the Holy Flame Church's headquarters. One was Gerhard, the head exarch. The other was Amalia, the dowager. And although they stood by Adelwin's side, Ulrich felt the pressure around him increasing. Sovereign Prince Hubert, your words startle me. How could you so glaringly accuse the Holy Flame Emperor of forbidden practices? Do you have evidence to provide? Gerhard asked, and immediately all understood his purpose. If Adelwin's breakthrough bode no good for him, Hubert's was even worse. After all, both the Empire and the Holy Flame Church, in a sense, represented the Celestial Church's secular interests. Ultimately, they were two factions belonging to the same camp. But the Voights were different. If Ulrich was found guilty of forbidden practices and the news reported to the Celestial Church's headquarters, the von Jürgen faced family extermination. At that time, the Voight would be free to run amok, and the Holy Flame Church's future prospects looked bleak. They may not dare usurp the throne, but it wouldn't be much different. Therefore, although Gerhard inwardly agreed with Hubert, this was a situation he had to prevent at all cost. Even if it meant joining hands to slaughter them all. As for Amalia, her thoughts were harder to fathom. Another light beam streaked across the sky, landing by Yvonne's side. It was Kron under the disguise of a suave, middle-aged man. His appearance and stance immediately made Ulrich wonder if he was the hidden cuckolder. And his next words confirmed Ulrich's suspicions. Sir, although Ulrich is muddled, you can't follow in his footsteps. Clearly, you see the truth for what it is, even if I don't speak the words. Alas, I fear the truth is even worse than what you imagine. Ulrich von Jürgen is not just guilty of an instance of forbidden practice. His entire cultivation base is built on demonism. With your current level, investigating it is simple, and the implications obvious. Following Conrad's words, Kron said with a polite bow, causing Adelwin's face to contort into a frown. Indeed, while he couldn't feel demonic forces from him, Ulrich's inexplicable growth pace had already triggered his suspicions. And today, those suspicions were confirmed. The sun fell, and the father rose. The implications were evident. Now, Adelwin genuinely wished to examine Ulrich's cultivation base to figure out his method's origin. But doing so at this juncture was no different from admitting his doubts. Hence, he refrained. Our forces are ready to spread the news across the Holy Continent and alert the Celestial Church. Should things reach this point, better than anyone, the von Jürgens are doomed to destruction. However, the Holy Empress, Holy Consort, and Noble Imperial Consort would be forced to follow you to the grave, which is a result we wish to avoid. Verena was Ulrich's wife while, even if only in name, Else and Yvonne were his highest-ranked consorts. Though their relatives had nothing to fear, they couldn't escape the purge. That much was fact. Seeing the words taking effect, Kron pursued. Unless forced into a dead end, we don't wish to resort to such means. Also, should we go all out, while victory or defeat is hard to predict, the capital, nearby towns and villages, everything across at least 3,000 miles, are doomed to destruction. Following such a shocking event, the commoners will start fleeing the country en masse. Therefore, we're willing to make a compromise. A peace treaty for 1 month. 1 month during which all hostilities between our parties are forbidden. We will also leave the Holy Flame City and not return, at least for that month's time. As long as you respect the terms, we won't spread the intel. Afterward, hostilities can freely resume. Are you willing? Kron asked, and before Adelwin could say anything, Ulrich roared. Rubbish. They are our consorts. Who gives you the right to take them away? We are the Emperor. If we want them to live, they live. If we want them to perish, they perish. Howda. Adelwin backhanded Ulrich across the cheek, sending him spiraling in the air, all without letting his gaze drift from Kron. Agreed, he replied, causing Gerhard to heave a sigh of relief. For him, the best result was to have the von Jürgen and Voight come to a peace treaty. As long as they mutually canceled out, he could fade into the background. Since things are settled, I shall take my leave. Oh, and congratulations, Grand Preceptor, on your breakthrough. Gerhard said toward Adelwin, using his official title, then vanished in a gray haze. "Congratulations, granduncle, on your breakthrough." Amalia politely congratulated him, then also vanished. The relation between Kvass and von Jürgen was complicated. Not only did they have the same ancestors, but they also maintained a relationship of intermarriage. Amalia's mother was Ulrich's grandaunt, thus making Adelwin her granduncle. And while he never glanced toward her, they'd exchanged several mental messages. "If there is nothing else, we shall take our leave," Hubert declared, and in a twister of dark star force, they all vanished from the von Jürgen's sight. Ulrich seethed with shame and wrath, his burgeoning madness barring him from clarity. But when Adelwin turned toward him, and his silver eyes nailed him, he could feel that Adelwin only needed to wave his hand for him to perish. This was the horrendous gap between the cross-tribulation saint and the star-connecting saint ranks. Although Adelwin's cultivation had just broken through one level, his entire existence was sublimated. Your evil knows no limits, and your existence is unpalatable. Using Gerhard's help, you plotted against your father, thus causing his death. Adelwin took a step toward Ulrich, causing his bones to crackle under the pressure of the star force. Then, you murdered your brothers with a borrowed knife to finally usurp the throne. If my injury didn't take 2 centuries to heal, I would have long since cleaned the house. But seeing that you were a competent emperor that made the common people his priority, rather than creating more instability, I allowed you to keep your life. However, Adelwin took another step, and now, Ulrich's internal organs shivered. Instinctively, he gathered all his strength within his divine shield. "Under my nose, you dared practice demonic arts and build your cultivation base on the corpses of relatives. Astray. Since you returned from the tower, you kept going astray, and your existence now threatens my house's stability, my house's future. This I cannot allow. Therefore, Ulrich, you must perish." Adelwin stretched out his index, causing a blue star beam to shoot toward Ulrich, aiming for his life. Without delay, Ulrich drove the divine shield against Adelwin's star beam. The star beam failed to pierce the divine artifact. However, the impact sent Ulrich flying backward with a massive eruption of blood. Still, he didn't dare delay, and with the divine shield serving as his guardian, burned his life force to sprint out of the holy flame city. "Adelwin, none can cross us unscathed. We swear to return and avenge this slight." Knowing that with the divine shield protecting him, killing Ulrich would require precise calculations, Adelwin returned his attention onto the house that still needed his help. Ulrich von Jürgen abdicated his throne and left the holy flame city. We shall handpick a new emperor to replace him, a wise and talented von Jürgen scion to be carefully nurtured in the future. Until the new emperor is ready to take the country's reins, I shall assume the regency," he proclaimed, and from various secluded spots of the imperial palace, gray beams rose to stop before him. "As you command, Grand Preceptor." The secluded von Jürgen elders bowed in both deference and approval. Meanwhile, Adelwin was willing to put down his pride and request help from his few friends within the Celestial Church, hoping to obtain an artifact that could help him suppress Ulrich's divine shield. Once he obtained one, regardless of where he hid, he would hunt Ulrich down and take his life. But in the meantime, there was one force that needed cleaning: the Holy Flame Church. And without Ulrich's backing, Conrad's avatar was forced to take on a new identity to carry on with his work. If the Celestial Church doesn't recall him, Adelwin is free to act as he sees fit. First, he will restructure the house. Second, he will take over the Holy Flame Church and unite both the imperial family and the clergy. Third, he will find a way to suppress Ulrich's artifacts and hunt him down to remove the threat his existence creates. With his level of holy sense, as long as Ulrich remains in the Holy Continent, he cannot escape. When those 3 steps are completed, like his ancestor 100,000 years ago, Adelwin will lead his spirit forces against the Void for one decisive battle. 1 month is barely enough, Conrad assessed before vanishing in the shadows. Chapter 223 Into the Tower. While a wave of trials, changes, and restructuration swept the Holy Flame City, Conrad's team arrived at the Tower of Rebirth's entrance. What awaited them was a gathering of dozens of roaring semi-saint experts lining up before the gate. Before them stood 4 men, 2 in black cassocks, 2 in white. Those 4 were infernal and celestial priests. With a cultivation of the early fate wrestling saint rank, they could easily stand at the summit of the secular world. However, in the 2 great religious factions, their status was not worth mentioning. Conrad's eyes swept the dozens of roaring semi-saints while his ears listened to their complaints. The tower's gates open once a week and have always been available to all. Why is it that today you're preventing us from seeking chances? This is unfair. Could it be that from now on, you plan to monopolize all it contains? You didn't do it before. Why start now? Right? The secular world semi-saints yelled in succession. Seeing this, Conrad shook his head. The tower is the joint construction of the infernal and celestial founders. It belongs to us, to begin with. Allowing you free passage was merely a show of goodwill. If we don't want you to trespass, how dare you protest? One of the 2 celestial church priests snapped and stretched out his hand. Immediately, dozens of fate locks appeared and dived into the complaining semi-saints to wrest their very destiny. Before they could understand what went on, the dozens of semi-saints collapsed on the floor, their lives lost. At that time, in a purple flash, a young woman appeared beside Conrad, dressed in a pink silk dress open at the abdomen and right waist to freely showcase her trimmed abs and spellbinding leg. She looked no older than 18. With long black hairs tied with an orchid chip, a flawless figure, and the olive skin typical of barbarian continent denizens, even pious monks would end up entranced by her unconstrained, demonic charm. She was Diana. With a smile, she turned toward Conrad, her black eyes staring directly into his. "Greetings, master," she politely said, causing Conrad to arch his eyebrows. "Oh, when did you start taking me as your master? I understand that there must be misunderstandings between us. Last time, I indeed lacked propriety and offended you. For that, I apologize. However, the fact of the matter is that I was reared for you to do with as you see fit. If you're not my master, who is? I'm here to make amends and beg for your forgiveness." Diana replied with a bow that gave a free glimpse on her bountiful cleavage. Conrad's lips curled into a smile. Inwardly, though, he sneered. "Well said. How do you plan to do that?" Thinking that there was room for maneuver, Diana raised her head and turned back toward the 4 priests. As you can see, the 2 factions each dispatched 2 priests to prevent secular world experts from entering. The reason is that the final holy war approach, and this time, they intend to wrest all the critical inheritances and resources lying in the tower. They're also using it as a preliminary battleground between their youth. The most outstanding disciples between the age of 80 and 100 are currently inside, leading their teams to cross the floors. Although secular world experts usually lose their lives in the tower, from time to time, a few startling talents emerge and harvest countless benefits. They wish to prevent such occurrences. Diana explained, and Conrad nodded in approval. That being the case, they will also block your team. However, with my Circer identification token, they won't stand in our way. You can just follow me in, undisturbed. As she spoke, Diana shifted her gaze back onto Conrad. Although the strength he displayed beforehand was outstanding, she didn't deem him able to contend with those early-stage fate wrestling saints. Surely, he would have to rely on her. Alas, she'd still underestimated him. "Unnecessary," Conrad nonchalantly replied and stretched out his hand. The holy broadsword appeared within, and leisurely, he stepped toward the gatekeepers. "Secular world ant, if you know what's good F." But before the priest could finish his words, the whistle of a sword slash echoed within his ear. Not only him, but the other 2 heard the same sword slash whistle. And by the time they registered the sound, their heads were soaring in the air with a large gush of blood. "Why is my body headless?" They wondered. Their brains then registered their deaths, and alongside their corpses, their heads dropped on the ground. Diana was startled. How could he be so strong? I'm sure last time he wasn't this dreadful. How long has it been? But while she floundered, the ladies ignored her and followed Conrad toward the gate. In a slow, grating sound, the gate opened, revealing a blue vortex. Snapping out of her torpor, Diana rushed toward Conrad, and alongside the group, vanished in the vortex. Driven by a superior force, they crossed the blue vortex. Meanwhile, a hoarse voice echoed within all their minds, a voice that seemed to peer into their hearts, able to grasp truth and falsehood. What is your faith? Who do you believe in? The infernal gods, Diana immediately replied. The voice seemed to trigger an immediate answer coming straight from the heart. Almost simultaneously, the harem members reacted. Conrad. Afterward, it was Conrad's turn, and to all that knew him a tiny bit, his answer came without surprise. Myself? Again, Diana was startled, and this time, she wasn't the only one. Even the hoarse voice was struck speechless. Interesting. Throughout 1,000,000 years, this is the 9th time that I see someone whose faith is himself, and the absolute first that I see individuals worshipping a mortal from the bottom of their hearts. Interesting, very interesting. Alas, the rules are the rules. You still fall into the rebel category. Within the tower, you shall face twice the suppression. Good luck. The voice halted, and under a massive eruption of light, the group vanished. Chapter 224, The First Floor. In a white haze, the team reappeared within the tower's first floor. If a floor it could be called, wherever the eyes went, only darkness lied. Neither Conrad nor the ladies at his side could see anything. Worse, they felt a crushing pressure drop on their shoulders. Crack. Conrad's feet sank into the ground while some of the ladies directly dropped on their knees, struggling to get back up. Only Zamira, Lena, and Diana managed to avoid dropping on their knees. Following a breath of time, the others returned to their feet, albeit struggling under the pressure. 20 times the gravity. This is 20 times the gravity. Conrad assessed while the pressure of his own weight seemed to drive him toward the floor. If they didn't quickly adapt, how could they fight? The same person can only enter the tower once in a lifetime. At the same time, the traps and challenges one face often change. Therefore, using the predecessor's experiences is almost useless. Diana explained while shivering on her feet. Unlike the others, she only faced 10 times the gravity, courtesy of her faith. However, there is one thing that never changes: the enemies. Each floor is defended by armored guards whose strength increase with higher floors. The armored guards are led by a floor guardian tasked with preventing us from reaching higher levels. We don't have to defeat the floor guardian to carry on, but if we do, we'll have access to the floor's principal loot. The guardians are immortal and always reconstruct for new entrants. Conrad had already obtained all this intel from Yvonne. Therefore, his face showed no ripple. According to Yvonne, on the first floor, they would face the Iron Guard. At first, all believed they'd fallen into a cave where no light passed. However, when Conrad attempted to light the place with a fireball, reality struck them hard. They could feel the heat but couldn't see the flames. Clearly, they'd all turned blind. Activate your spiritual senses, Conrad calmly ordered, and instantly, all activated their spiritual senses. However, Diana aside, none could push it more than 3 meters ahead. As for Diana, she was stuck to 6 meters. Well shit, Conrad inwardly cursed and activated his origin sight. Finally, light returned to his eyes, and he could see they now laid in a narrow passageway walled by dark gray stones. There only was one road ahead. All of you activate your origin sights. You'll then regain your vision. During their secluded cultivation, Conrad didn't just improve their bloodlines and physiques. He also granted them abilities to enhance their battle power, either through the system or the contracts. Instantaneously, all regained their senses, and Diana was now the only one unable to freely grasp the perimeter. Let's go. Following Conrad's lead, all advanced, taking carefully measured steps to avoid falling into a trap. This went on for 1 hour, after which the group stopped to readjust to the gravity. There is only one road, but no exit in sight. It feels like we're not making any progress whatsoever. Ileana sighed, speaking the words that echoed in the mind of all others. Even with their origin sight, they couldn't see the end of the road. However, the path at their back clearly showed they'd been making progress. How long could this road possibly be? And with the gravity crushing them, how long would it take to see the exit? But as all were lost in thoughts, a creaking sound echoed from the nearby walls. All swept them with their gazes, and their eyes widened in fright. Without delay, Conrad waved his hands, forming a force field around the team. The others then supplemented the force field with their own energy. At that time, dozens of earth pikes sprouted from the walls above, at the left and at the right to impale them where they stood. Bang! The earth pikes slammed against the force field, the collision sending tremors throughout the ground. Fortunately, they failed to break through. With the force field protecting them, the group resumed its advance, but soon realized that every time they stopped to readjust to the crushing gravity, the earth pikes would assail them. Hateful. What kind of sick individual built this nonsense? Jasmine cursed. They'd been going on for several hours with the exit still nowhere to be seen. Under the weight of 20 times the gravity, asking them to carry non-stop through several miles was no different from demanding their demise. Still, since the relentless pike hammering prevented them from getting the rest they needed, they could only carry onward. But at that time, as if triggered by Jasmine's words, the walls trembled, and from them, hundreds of identical shapes appeared. As a knowledgeable earthling, Conrad felt those shapes oddly akin to the terracotta army. The shapes emerged from the walls, turning into iron terracotta soldiers that blocked the group front and back, sandwiching them without leaving any room for escape. Seeing the hundreds of iron soldiers that appeared following her curses and now blocked them on all angles, Jasmine blinked in disbelief, her mouth forming an O shape. All eyes turned toward her, and within them, rage clearly burned. Why are you looking at me like that? This has clearly nothing to do with me. She protested against the silent, raging, and inquisitive eyes. Like a flawlessly trained battalion, the Iron Guards aimed their swords and spears at the group. 250 at the front, 250 at the back. Now, this is what I call a dead end. Conrad sighed and summoned 6 red circles. 6 circle SP-. But as he began the spell casting and gathered a destructive power of the saint level, the walls trembled, overtaken by violent tremors and threatening to collapse from all sides. You gotta be kidding me. If I use a 6-circle spell, you'll collapse on us. Conrad realized in outrage and aborted the incantation. At that time, the Iron Guard attacked, the vanguard charging with spear thrusts, while the sword-wielders leaped into the air to tackle the group from above. From the intensity of their aura, Conrad judged their strength at the peak of the transcendent rank. To arms! You girls protect the rear. I will carve out an escape road. Conrad summoned his holy broadsword. Miraculous transcendence erupted from his meridians, and in a dazzling sword slash, 10 Iron Guards were slashed in two. Chapter 225, Crossing the Tower Part 1. Thus, the first battle began. Although the Iron Soldiers' individual strength merely stood at the peak of the transcendent rank, they didn't have gravity to worry about. Fluid moves and perfect coordination rapidly showcased the seriousness of their threats. Without the use of mighty spells, though Conrad could effortlessly cleave a path for himself, for those at his back, that was another story. Or so he thought. As soon as his sword slash split the 10 Iron Soldiers in two, their two halves again joined one another, returning to a perfect state before resuming their charge toward the group. Conrad frowned. Since when do the Guardians regenerate mid-fight? Don't even mention transcendent rank experts. With such a trial, how do low and mid-level semi-saints survive? Is the tower deliberately making things difficult for us? Conrad wondered, but he wasn't given much time to pursue his thought. Though the narrow passageway guaranteed that they could only battle a small enemy wave at a time, with their foes' instant regeneration abilities, it also made fighting their way out nigh impossible. Playing, horizontally bending her energy sword, Ileana stopped the offensive of 3 iron guards, deflected their strength, then beheaded them. At her side, Jasmine skewered them one after the other, while at their back, Daphne summoned a bow and fired energy arrows at the incoming troops. The others didn't fall behind. Freya and Astarte, who cultivated the battle scripture, seemed to get stronger as the fight dragged, the intensity of clashing steel empowering their moves. Zamira and Lena, who possessed the highest cultivation, led the charge, while Phaedra and Aliki assisted Diana in firing spells. Meanwhile, Conrad handled the front, cleaving dozens of enemies with every single sword slash. But to no avail. Worse, they didn't dare step forward because they knew well enough that doing so would allow the reconstructing guards to divide and encircle them. The 100-flower scripture practitioners could turn into light particles and flee. However, that decision came at the cost of the others. And in this current situation, using a stronger arsenal such as lineage weapons served no purpose. It wasn't about how many they could kill. They had to find a way to stop the regeneration process. And following half an hour of melee, though the rear still stood firm, Conrad didn't doubt they would soon start faltering. He'd long since considered pulling them all into his space pouch, but realized he couldn't. He could neither bring people in nor bring them out. Only items were allowed. Since the guards are invincible, to begin with, why forbid the use of sixth circle spells? It's not like it would anything. On the contrary, I would exhaust me faster. What can I do with a sixth circle spell that I can't do with arms? Conrad wondered while beheading the assailants, and suddenly, the realization dawned onto him. Kill them all at the same time, in a single move. Understanding the scheme, Conrad closed his blind eyes, focusing solely on his origin site. Words spoken by Yvonne during one of their numerous sparring sessions echoed within his mind. All things in this world possess a force. The question is whether we can harness it or not. Weapons are no different. Swords, spears, hammers, staves, all possess an innate force which once untapped will let their might skyrocket. But unleashing a weapon's innate force is one thing. Combining it with yours is another. Once you can achieve that, even an average weapon can rival holy artifacts. Conrad lowered his broadsword, and from it, thin strands of white light slowly emerged. The thin strands thickened, becoming dazzling white rays whose mere presence hacked several of the assailing guards. The miraculous transcendence swirling around him, then shrunk to coil around the sword, the two forces merging to become one. Again, Conrad's eyes opened, and though no aura swirled around him, the pressure emanating from his presence rose to a new level. With a 360-degree rotation, he drew a perfect sword arc, releasing a dazzling sword force ring that spread throughout the 500 iron guards, blocking them front and back. The iron guards stopped dead in their tracks, their armored bodies quivering, and simultaneously, they exploded in thousands of perfectly cut metallic pieces. This time, they didn't regenerate. With her limited vision preventing her from grasping the situation, Diana was startled. However, the others were undisturbed. It was almost as if Conrad's achievements were all natural and needn't trigger surprise. Indeed, this was faith. Onward, Conrad ordered after making sure none of his girls were injured, and the team resumed its advance. This time, they carried on undisturbed and reached the end of the road. The shining light clearly marked the exit, but before they could cross it, a figure emerged from the light and landed before them. That figure looked almost identical to the iron guards they'd previously faced. However, it was twice the size, and an iron crown also rested on top of its head. Conrad identified it as the first floor guardian. Rather than sword and spear, the guardian wielded a glaive, and the aura emanating from it rivaled that of peak stage semi-saints. The guardian assumed its battle stance, aiming its glaive at the group. Guardians didn't have to be defeated. As long as the team could bypass them, they could carry on. However, without defeating the Guardian, they could only have access to the scattered floor loot. The primary loot would remain out of reach. Freya, husband. Freya replied to Conrad's call. You have 10 moves. I will do it in 5. Freya replied and stepped forward. Diana felt that woman too conceited. Although the Guardian was a metallic construct, it possessed spiritual intelligence and a robust foundation. Even if Freya's victory was guaranteed, claiming to triumph in 5 moves was simply arrogant. To say nothing of the gap of an entire rank that ensured she could, at best, obtain a Pyrrhic victory. The Guardian stomped its right foot and shot toward her, aiming its glaive at her neck. Freya bent backward to let the flow fly by her nose, then drove her sword toward the Guardian's torso. In the blink of an eye, the Guardian raised its knee, slamming the flat side of the sword to deflect the blow while rotating on the left to land back on its feet. And as Freya readjusted her stance, it flew toward her with a frontal thrust. Vast semi-holy force erupted from the glaive, but as it approached her bountiful chest, absolute transcendence exploded from Freya. She sidestepped, split the glaive in 2, lopped off the Guardian's legs, and tore off its head, all in 3 perfect moves that took less than 1,000th of a second. Thud. What remained of the Guardian collapsed on the floor, and its iron carcass then vanished in light particles. Conrad nodded and beckoned. Again, only Diana was startled. The realization that she'd fallen in a team of monsters led by a horrifying creature finally dawned onto her. Now, she finally realized why Conrad paid her such little heed. It wasn't that he looked down on her. With the team he already had, there was nothing to look up to. She could only become another one. Freya stopped by Conrad's side, her fluttering eyelashes begging for attention, while to others, she remained uncompromising and overbearing. Before Conrad, she would immediately turn into a loving pet craving attention. Dear husband, did I do well? Well, very well. I must reward you. With a roguish grin, he seized her by the waist, holding her firmly in one arm, while his lips pulled her into an ardent kiss. Unable and unwilling to resist Conrad's coiling tongue, Freya melted in his arms. But the brazen demon prince didn't stop there, pushing his knee between Freya's thighs and rubbing her snatch beneath the fabric. MHM. The combination triggered a mini-orgasm that sent a small tremor throughout Freya's supple body. She collapsed on Conrad's chest. Faced with Freya's express care, the others resolved to strive for merits on the following floors. And alarmed by this odd scene, Diana's eyes went from Conrad to his harem girls, wondering what drug he injected in them that they sought his touch at every turn. All right, enough playing around. Seriousness returned to the troops, and without further delay, they stepped into the light, landing in a spacious room where 3 massive gates stood. Before anyone could react, the middle gate fired a beam toward Freya's forehead, then opened. Clearly, the primary loot lied there. As for the other 2, they had to be pushed open. Chapter 226, Crossing the Tower Part 2. According to Yvonne, the inheritances within the Tower of Rebirth were all protected by encoding. The inheritances weren't mere resources, they also contained the memories and experiences of the experts. Some basic things such as herbs and elixirs were available for the tower climbers to pluck. However, without decrypting the fallen expert's message, obtaining their inheritance was a pipe dream. The first 2 floors possessed inheritances of the star-taming stage. Therefore, while they were far from being Conrad's aim, he also didn't take them lightly. They'd greatly facilitate his faction and army building. We split into 3 groups. Phaedra, Ileana, Freya, Lena in one. Jasmine, Zamira, Aliki, Astarte in another. Daphne and Diana with me. If you complete your plundering before the others, assist the other group. Plundering all inheritances is a must. With his origin sight, Conrad could see that no team lied in the treasure rooms. Since there no longer was any danger to face, splitting brought no harm. As for why Conrad kept Diana with him, that was naturally to not let her out of his sight. The group stepped in their respective treasure rooms. With Diana and Daphne on his heels, Conrad walked into the primary treasure room where the first floor's core inheritance lied. From the dark underground, the trio landed in a lush green prairie where exotic flowers and herbs bloomed. Even without the system, guided by his origin site, Conrad could identify those plants. A 1,000 years old crimson flame flower, a 1,000 years old ginseng, a 1,000 years old holy grass. Those and many more lied in the thousands within the prairie. All were rare ingredients helpful in the concoction of holy rank pills and medicines. Their individual prices in the hundreds of millions of purple crystals, for the cheapest. Daphne's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. Even Diana was impressed. While such herbal gardens couldn't startle a Circer, the sheer quantity of herbs was astonishing. Better than anyone, she knew the difficulty of maintaining such a garden. If this was only the first floor, one could only wonder what lied ahead. In the distance, 11 towering trees stood on one perfect line. With a wave of his hand, Conrad plucked the herbs and flowers, using his vast telekinetic powers to bring them all into his space bracelet. Then, alongside the two, Conrad vanished, to reappear before the trees. Each possessed ancient writings carved on their trunks, cryptic texts containing the essence of the deceased's will. "Daphne, it's time to work," Conrad declared, then sat cross-legged to await Daphne's triumphant return. Startled, she made a 180-degree turn toward him. "Me? How could it be? I can barely count my fingers. How could I possibly decrypt all these?" Daphne objected while waving her hands in disagreement, causing Diana's lips to curl into a smile. "I can do it if you want." But seeing the newcomer about to rob an opportunity for merit, a new wave of resolve filled her heart. The nerves. When father and daughter are discussing important matters, who gives you the right to butt in? We have a clear, established hierarchy. Even if you're surnamed Rakers, you can't break the rules and rob your senior's merits. Daphne snapped, then turned toward the first tree to analyze the writing. Struck speechless, Diana blinked in disbelief while black lines formed on Conrad's forehead. Did she call me Rakers? Rakers? Circer in Rev? Enlightenment brightened Diana's mind, and her eyes shone with fury. The gals. Now she really wished to dig out that insolent woman's tongue. But with Conrad sitting on the side, she didn't dare make a rash move. Disgruntled, she turned heels and sat beside him. The celestial and infernal disciples should be crossing the third floor as we speak. Usually, without great chances or preparation, most can never go beyond the third floor. Although the leaders even came with fate-destroying Saint War puppets, it should still take a substantial amount of time. I believe we will find them there. Diana explained while observing Conrad's reaction. Alas, his face showed no concern. Initially, she also wanted to say that some of them would break through the holy rank inside the tower. But realizing such strength couldn't deter Conrad, she refrained. Instead, she tried to find a worthy topic to grab his attention. At that time, dazzling light erupted from the first tree, and the writing vanished to reveal the insides of the trunks where cultivation methods, artifacts, holy crystals, and pills lied in abundance. Succeeded. I succeeded. Daphne screamed in delight with her arms raised in gleeful victory. So fast? Instantly, Diana's eyes shifted back on her. Why was that airheaded girl able to decipher a star-taming stage expert's will in such record's time? What sorcery was this? Instead, Conrad was undisturbed. Although Daphne was unreliable and often spouted nonsense, her cultivation talent and comprehension abilities were high, to begin with. Back in Housecracked, unlike Ileana who diligently cultivated, Daphne only did it under Wolfgang's constraints, spending most of her time finding new ways to abuse and emasculate the males. Still, her cultivation didn't fall behind, remaining only a few steps away from Ileana's. Now with Conrad's demonic gifts and the system's upgrades, her talent and comprehension abilities had skyrocketed. Conrad didn't doubt she would effortlessly decrypt all the wills and obtain the inheritances. Light rays flew from the tree trunks to dive into Daphne's forehead, engraving the expert's memories and experiences within her mind. Without delay, she cracked the wills, one after another, and harvested all the inheritances. Using a space bracelet gifted by Conrad, Daphne pocketed the pills, cultivation methods, and artifacts, then brought her loot back to Conrad. Mission accomplished. Beloved Daddy, I exhausted myself days and nights to fulfill the tasks you entrusted to me. Don't you think I deserve a reward? Daphne pouted, causing Diana to rise in outrage. Horseshit. We've been here for less than 15 minutes. Where do the days and nights come from? You can't be so shamed-dash. Arg. Before she could react, Diana was sent flying backward by Daphne's impromptu palm strike. She then took her spot by Conrad's side and tugged on his sleeve while still pouting for attention. What am I ever gonna do with you? Conrad sighed and wrapped his arm around her shoulders to pull her against his chest. I have just obtained the complete inheritance of several profound alchemist and refining masters. In the future, you can leave pill and artifact refining to me, she confidently declared while rubbing her head against Conrad's chest. First get one of the sublime rank, and then we can talk. Gently, he planted a soft kiss on her temple. Meanwhile, Diana struggled to return on her feet. The shock of that palm strike too hard to bear. In one move, she realized that despite her cultivation being an entire rank above, if they truly had to come to blows, Daphne's victory was almost guaranteed. But how could it be? She had a supreme foundation, golden bloodline, and mighty physique. How many supreme meridians did she condense? What bloodline and physique could a secular world girl possibly possess to make up for the cultivation gap? But as she struggled to rise from the ground, the illusory form of a gargantuan emerald serpent with 2 pairs of scaled wings appeared in the air, its demonic pressure nailing her on the ground. Dread welled up within her chest, but in the blink of an eye, the illusory figure vanished, as if it was never there, to begin with. Was that an echidna? The now trembling Diana wondered, but before she could find the answer, the other girls arrived with the acquired loot which they presented to Conrad. Well done. Now, to the next floor. The team located the exit circle and vanished in a light festival to reappear on the 2nd floor. Now, a seemingly endless desert awaited, bringing alongside it dry air and suffocating heat waves. Chapter 227 Building Flaws and Hidden Dangers. Oppressive heat waves during the day, chilling air during the night, and gigantic sandstorms in between. This quickly became the group's quotidian, a routine no one could save them from. The first day, though the brutal heat and sudden temperature change were hard to bear under 20 times the gravity, they could still manage it. After all, thanks to the 1st floor, they'd gotten accustomed to the gravity's pressure. On the 2nd day, it got more challenging, and many could start feeling their legs tremble. On the 3rd, the difficulty reached an absurd level, and although transcendent level experts and above could live without food or water, all rediscovered the meaning of thirst. With the end still nowhere in sight, the sweating Conrad frowned. He could feel that more than one had reached their breaking point. Only the unwillingness to disappoint him kept driving them onward. Worse, they'd yet to meet this floor's guard which could attack at any time. But while Conrad analyzed the situation, startled yelps came from his back. Aya! Ileana and Jasmine yelled in tandem, quicksand forming beneath their feet and trapping them within. With their bodies marching on will alone, they didn't have the strength to resist. Without delay, Conrad stretched out his hands, causing a massive wave of telekinetic powers to erupt and pull the 2 out of the quicksand. Careful, he reminded, and they nodded in approval, before resuming the road back to the unknown. On the 4th day, the contours of a towering pyramid appeared in the distance, and all believed the exit should lie inside. Galvanized by the thought, they tapped into hidden strength reserves to accelerate the pace toward the pyramid. But as they reached the entrance, the sandy soil shivered. Hundreds of quicksand formed without warning, and from them, 1,000 steel guards emerged. This time, however, Conrad faced no suppression and was free to use his entire arsenal. Sixth circle spell, searing sky. Flame-red clouds filled the sky, and from them, a deluge of fire descended onto the steel guards, obliterating them all in a single move. Undisturbed, the group carried onward, diving into the pyramid where the Guardian awaited. This time, its cultivation was of the early rising saint rank. With a single palm strike, Conrad blew it into metallic dust. The group's eyes then fell on a vast array of coffins above which inscriptions rested. First, regain your strengths, then decrypt the wills and harvest the inheritances. Conrad ordered, and to save time, he participated in the contest. 3 hours afterward, all wills were decrypted, and in tandem, the coffins opened, releasing beams of maroon light. With his origin sight, Conrad could see the coffin's helpfulness in Tao sublimation and pure self-creation. Each chose one and buried themselves inside. Once the coffin's lid closed, Conrad shut his eyes, and his mind drifted to another one. A world where nothingness reigned. Emotions and desires slowly subsided, freeing Conrad's mind of fetters and allowing him to focus on understanding himself and the road he pursued. For an unknown quantity of time, Conrad's immobile body drifted in the darkness, while his thoughts targeted a succession of questions. Who am I? What do I want? What road do I pursue? Supremacy is the answer that first comes to mind. But how to build such a road? Invincibility? Absolute authority? Both? Yes, but why do I feel that there still is a missing ingredient? Something I do not possess? And as Conrad's thoughts swirled, his body sunk deeper in the darkness, the fall carrying on until it completely vanished from sight, devoured by nothingness. At that time, a voice echoed within his mind. In the world of the three, who dares claim supremacy? The road you seek is not traveled, forbidden within the three realms. To build it goes against the natural order and the will of the three. Others sought it before, but aware of the threats and difficulties they would face, chose to retreat. If you are willing to challenge the natural order and cross this untraveled road, step into my domain and I shall give you a chance at enlightenment. A mild voice echoed in Conrad's mind, and alongside it, a pure white star appeared within the world of darkness to brighten Conrad's sight. As if driven by instinct, he flew toward it, vanishing into the star to reappear in a peaceful clearing. There, a wrinkled old man with a Guan Yu-like beard sat cross-legged on top of a human-sized lotus. Though dressed in a simple white robe without any form of ornaments, his transcendental bearing prevented any from looking down on him. Better, his mere sight produced reverence that seemed to burst straight from the heart, and as Conrad stepped toward him, he could feel that around this man, all paths stood in harmony, as if the very essence of the Tao lied in this place. Who are you? Conrad couldn't help but blurt out, his lips unable to suppress the words. In the beginning there was one. One produced two, two produced three, and three produced all things. In immemorial times, I possessed an identity. Today, however, I merely exist within the Tao. Names no longer define me. But if you must have one, you can think of me as the essence of the first cultivation step. The old man replied in the same mild, soothing tone. The first cultivation step was to become a saint. The second, to become a sage. The third, to become a god. As for the fourth, no one knew the end. Welcome, aspiring supreme being. In the trillions of years since the start of the three, many have craved this road. But few truly dared step onto it, and none survived it. You must know that while the benefits are unparalleled, the cons outweigh the pros. True, should you build your Tao foundation on this road, your strength will sharply rise, and even within the higher realms, you'll rarely find a match at the same level. But your sublimation speed will drastically decrease. At the same time, the tribulations you'll face in the future will be 100 times harsher than your peers. You may not fear man, but you shall dread heaven's retribution. The old man calmly said, but his warnings failed to deter Conrad's ambitions. Supremacy is my highest aspiration. If my will doesn't hold the three realms in submission, all is inconsequential. I must become supreme, or I might as well not exist. Conrad straightforwardly replied. Since you're determined, allow me to guide you onto the road. Invincible might, absolute authority, unshakable heart. Those are the three requirements to become a supreme being. For you, the first two are not difficult. But with your current trend, the last will elude you for a lifetime. The old man began with his eyes remaining shut throughout the exchange. His words caused Conrad's face to contort into a frown. True, in your previous life, you were chased and led to the brink of destruction before fortunately getting saved by a higher existence and reincarnated into the ancient crystal world. There, you stepped on the road of cultivation, and indeed, in the early days, you faced near death twice. Alas, from the moment you obtained a pure demonic blood, you never suffered genuine defeat. Stronger people, you have played. Equals, you routinely crush. And as your cultivation deepens, so does the horrendous gap between you and your peers. In fact, you do not have peers in the proper sense. Because of that God's gift and your own lineage, at least within that mortal world, unless you desperately court death, your life will rarely be at stake. Therefore, you do not fear. Even if the enemy's strength surpasses yours by a large margin, you do not dread. Today, you can call it confidence, but in the future, it can quickly turn into complacency. The few threats you've faced pale before your overwhelming successes and achievements. Even for an average cultivator, there are many hidden dangers. But for you who pursue the supreme being road, that is intolerable. After all, how can a feeble, complacent heart claim supremacy? To perfect your Tao, you must perfect your heart. Turn it into an immovable mountain that fears neither storms nor hurricanes and can shoulder all tribulations. Never forget that the Tao exists within the heart. It is the foundation of the self, and for those born outside the wills, it is also the limit. As the old man's preached, Conrad closed his eyes, letting the words sink in his soul. They thundered within his mind, causing the world around him to spin, and his soul to reach a higher state of enlightenment. Conrad sat cross-legged. In his right hand appeared a peerless sword. In his left, a crown, and around him, a bronze armor with minor cracks formed. The peerless sword represented invincibility, the crown authority, and the fractured armor a flawed Tao heart. But as Conrad pondered how to mend the fissures and perfect himself, the old man's voice echoed. On the 7th floor lies a tribulation valley. There, if your will is strong enough, you can refine your Tao heart and turn it into an unshakable mountain. In the meantime, let the Overlord open the road to your first sublimation. The Tao world collapsed, and Conrad reappeared in a wasteland of fire and brimstone. In the sky, the shadow of an indiscernible visage appeared, and while he could still not see through its true form, Conrad effortlessly recognized that figure as the Overlord. Boy, we meet again. Chapter 228, First Sublimation. Again, Conrad stood before the master of the infernal realm. Or was he? Having listened to the old man's preaching and recalling all the stories surrounding them, he couldn't help but feel that neither the warden nor the overlord were free existences. Their powers might be unrivaled, but their bound to their respective realms also surpassed that of all others. Messengers? Incarnations? The exact answer was hard to pinpoint. Still, it mattered not. At least, in this instance, it didn't. I hope you're not counting on that unruly father of yours. He's still recovering from hell's punishment. The Overlord's hoarse, authoritative voice thundered within Conrad's mind. Undisturbed, his lips curled into a smile. My path no longer needs others to fight for. But I'm curious, what is my transgression this time? The supreme Tao is forbidden, locked to all lives within the three realms. Since you exist under my jurisdiction, it is my duty to test you. Cross my trial and thrive, fail and perish. Conrad's smile broadened, and in his purple eyes, only serenity shone. Do your worst? Instantaneously, horrible black flames descended from the wasteland sky, earth, and every corner to shoot toward Conrad. And while this scene reminisced of the time he congealed his 12th meridian, the flames might have increased 100-fold. Stretching out his arms, Conrad let his miraculous transcendence erupt alongside his four physiques. And feeling the supreme overlord pressure emanating from him, beneath his shadowy cloaking, no ripple flashed on the overlord's face. Perhaps in another location, he would have felt some discomfort, but within the trial, bias and personal feelings didn't exist. He merely enforced Hell's will. In a flash, the deluge of hellfire surrounded Conrad from all sides, its startling might and voracious hunger calling for his life. Suppression. Primal force. The supreme overlord physique suppression forced the hellfire to halt mid-air while the divine primal physique's golden primal force eroded its might and dissolved its offensive. Following a silent, fierce struggle, the hellfire freed itself from the two forces' pressure and resumed its assault onto Conrad. Though drastically weakened, it still was a force to be reckoned with. The infernal flames locked him from all sides, leaving no room for escape. Fusing the powers of his physiques and his miraculous transcendence within his palms, in succession, Conrad threw hundreds of palm strikes at the front, back, left, right, and above. Each palm strike made the corrupted air shiver and sent tremors throughout the ground. The hellfire collapsed and retreated at breakneck speed. But as if reinvigorated by a foreign force, it returned with greater might, turning into 5 gaping hellfire maws that blocked Conrad from all sides. Still, he didn't waver, and his eyes shifted back onto the overlord above. Next time, be more creative. Conrad began with a relaxed, amused tone while clenching his right fist. Because this level can never bar my path, his eyes shone with purple light, and alongside his physique's energies and vast demonic force, his miraculous transcendence merged within his right fist. Conrad aimed his fist at the ground below and punched out. Boom! A massive explosion of gold, purple, and rainbow-colored light erupted to obliterate the incoming hellfire maws. As the light dispersed, Conrad no longer stood in the wasteland. Only the overlord remained. Fool, when even I do not dare claim supremacy, how could it be yours to seize? In the future, you will understand that for those born within the 3 realms, supremacy is a sham, an alluring pitfall. The overlord scoffed, then vanished from the trial land. Meanwhile, Conrad reappeared within the ancient crystal world, or rather, within the coffin. The lid above him opened, and his body floated toward the surface, bathing in golden light. The ladies had long since finished their cultivation and stood in anxiety around his coffin. 3 months. It had been 3 months since he locked himself within, and during that time, even the connection they held was temporarily severed. Were it not for their profound faith in him, they would have believed that he perished in cultivation deviation. But at last, he returned. And at his back, a pair of bright golden light wings sprouted while the contours of an illusory ring appeared above his head. The mark that he'd officially broken through to the semi-holy rank, sublimated in both the martial and spiritual paths. And Diana, who felt the embryonic Tao swirling around him, couldn't help but shiver in fright. A force that commanded obedience and reverence. A force that rippled with absolute might hid within that budding Tao, making her wonder what shape it would take when it reached completion. Leisurely, Conrad landed on the ground, and his eyes swept the women around him. Zamira, Lena, and Diana had broken through to the rising saint rank, while the others crossed 4 levels to now stand at the 4th step of the semi-holy rank. On the scene, his breakthrough seemed the smallest, but his strength increase was by far the highest. And as he assessed the might of his embryonic Tao, Conrad firmly believed that by the time he achieved sainthood, before him, even cross-tribulation saints would be forced to retreat. Indeed, 1st step old man, I understand your warnings. He inwardly sighed, then returned his attention onto the ladies. To the 3rd floor. I'm eager to see the abilities of those so-called top talents, Conrad ordered, and after pocketing all that remained, the group stepped on the teleportation circle leading to the third floor. Again, the scenery changed, and this time, they appeared in a vast swamp world whose air rippled with toxic energies. Breathing in that air, many directly vacillated. Only after rotating their cultivation bases did they regain their foothold. As for Conrad, with his stolus physique, this floor was nothing more than a treasure trove. Every breath he took empowered his physique, bringing it closer to the divine rank. With a wave of his hand, he summoned 9 green stolus feathers which flew toward his ladies. Wielding them, the toxins within the poisonous air no longer affected them. Chapter 229 Kill the Useless, Enslave the Useful. Diana, who witnessed this scene, almost spat blood. How could she not see that Conrad deliberately ignored her? With a forced smile, she stepped closer toward him, imitating Freya's eyelash fluttering to request attention. Master, you can't be this biased. After all, though I lack contributions, I have been serving you loyally since my arrival. Oh. With a shocked, I don't know what you mean expression, Conrad turned toward Diana, who focused her cultivation base on suppressing the poison. Right now, the air was so toxic that the average semi-saint would collapse upon entering. Even with her knowledge, Diana couldn't understand why the challenges of this time were this arduous. This was no longer a trial, but a clear invitation to destruction. If she didn't know better, she would really assume the tower was exerting all its resources to ensure no one could reach the top. But how could it be? Staring at that tempting face of hers, Conrad's lips curled into a smile. You said it yourself, you lack contributions. There is also no great affection that binds us. Therefore, if you want my favor, you'll have to work on it. What do you want me to do? She asked, a wave of apprehension welling up within her chest as she registered Conrad's demonic tone. Give me a detailed description of the 2 factions' teams. Names, quantity, status, everything. Don't leave out anyone. Conrad replied while stroking her cheek with his bent, right index. The move only heightened Diana's vigilance. Why now? Why so suddenly? Although brutal competition existed between the infernal cult's great houses, they were, at the end of the day, one camp. The teams dispatched to the tower were the cream of the crop between the age of 80 and 100. Diana may not care about the Celestial Church's disciples, but she certainly didn't wish to see the infernal cult's chosen face mishap. Obviously, because I plan to kill them all. Or rather, kill the men and take the women. You see, I can't afford to have anyone know of my little trip into the tower. All eventualities must be taken care of. We're doomed to come across them and clash for resources. But if some survive, in the future words will spread. I need to know precisely what I'm dealing with, and make sure neither the infernal cult nor Celestial Church disciples live to tell the tales. As for the ladies, we can be more tolerant. The straightforwardness with which Conrad said those words again made Diana re-evaluate the depths of his evil heart. Worse, House Circer currently had a team within the tower. A team led by another one of Conrad's cousins. Although he wasn't an inheritor, that was because, before the tower, his cultivation had yet to break through the holy rank. Still, no one doubted that his strength was leagues above Ison's, and that as soon as he stepped into the tower, he would break through several levels. With Conrad having refused the position, he was the most likely successor to Ison's seat and enjoyed the elder's favor. Even Gulistan held high expectations in him. His death would cause substantial waves within House Circer. Not only him, but all team leaders also possessed earth-shaking background within the 2 factions. Those were absolutely not individuals that could be killed at will. Once they stepped out of the tower, problems were bound to arise. If not for Conrad, at least for her. Please, Rekansi. But before she could finish her words, Conrad grabbed her by the crotch, stopping her dead in her tracks. Her eyes widened in stupor. Joking. I'm joking. The useless will die, the useful will change faith. In the near future, they can become my eyes and ears within the 2 factions. Why would I give up on such premium manpower? Conrad whispered in Diana's ears. Though, I must say your reaction was a tad bit disappointing. As a servant, why is it that your personal safety trumps your master's desires? Why is it that your existence doesn't revolve around the satisfaction of my will? I'm not a wise monarch. I'm a tyrant. To me, the lack of blind devotion in a servant is liability. Conrad's grip tightened on Diana's crotch, and a wave of demonic energy flew by his fingers to penetrate her body, blood, meridians, and soul. Ah! She groaned in a mixture of pleasure and pain before the pressure relaxed. Even if you wish to advise, to lead me onto a better road, you should have first given the information, because such was my demand. Again, Conrad's hand clenched around Diana's crotch, sending painfully blissful jolts of electricity to course through her veins. Ah! It was incomprehensible, as if within Conrad's touch, she was nothing more than a toy, unable to resist. Surrender and abandon, the only words swirling within her mind. The building pressure brought her to the edge, but before she could go over and indulge in a delightful release, Conrad retracted his hand, then alongside his 9 harem members, left toward the deeper recesses of the floor. Helpless, Diana dropped on her knees, confused and unable to pick her next course of action. With their origin site leading the way, it wouldn't be long before they located the 2 factions whose leaders currently battled for the ownership of a Black Mar. Although he still stood several miles away, the Black Mar's scent drew Conrad like a bee toward its cherished honey. The tremendous poisonous force within, enough to bring his Stola's physique to the next level, thus allowing him to save billions of EXP. Moreover, potent infernal forces also lingered within. But at the moment, 1,500 bronze guards led by the Guardian blocked the road toward the Black Mar and the wondrous treasures it concealed. Although the bronze guards were merely at the mid-stage of the semi-holy rank, and the Guardian at the mid-stage of the rising saint rank, their sheer number and coordination made them impossible to ignore. With the Guardian serving as the epicenter, each guard was connected to another in an intricate, profound formation that magnified their battle power, causing the celestial and infernal disciple to face countless hardships. Alongside his ladies, Conrad stopped, observing the scene and contenders from afar. The celestial church disciples were led by 3 men. The first, tall and handsome with flowing golden hairs and eyes embellished by a powerful musculature. At first glance, Conrad recognized him as a sun spirit. The second one was the polar opposite, short and slender with elongated ears, dark blue hairs, and eyes of the same color. A moon spirit, without a shred of doubt. As for the last one, though he clearly was male, he possessed a kind of feminine beauty that effortlessly put most women to shame. With pearl-white hairs and bewitching magenta eyes, his mere presence felt like a mirage coming straight from a dream. A dream spirit, obviously. The 3 ruling houses of the Celestial Church. The Worth Sun Spirits. The Kornberg Moon Spirits. The Bergen Dream Spirits. While compared to the Paragon Spirits, they are very few. The vast majority of elders and protectors come from those 3 houses. The current leader and successor of the Celestial Church are surnamed Worth. Conrad explained toward his ladies before shifting his attention on the infernal cult's 3 houses, who for once fought alongside their sworn enemies. Chapter 230. Where is that clown coming from? Part 1. Beside the 3 celestial team leaders stood 3 figures whose aura didn't lose out to theirs. Of the 3, one was a handsome young man with features 30% similar to Ison's, while the another stood at more than 2 meters, with an excessively muscular frame and beard that seemed out of place on his youthful visage. As for the last leader, she was a ravishing beauty with blood-red eyes that reminisced Adler's and a delicate, porcelain skin which, alongside her inexpressive face, gave her the appearance of an emotionless doll. The Circer-humans, the Auric slaughter fiends, and the Taural blood fiends. Together, the 3 ruling houses of the infernal cult. Of the 3, the Circer ranked slightly above the Auric, while the Taural stood 1 step above. Having done his homework before stepping into the tower, Conrad had a solid understanding of them. Their cultivation level is high, but compared to their wealth, it's not worth mentioning. If we came to blows, depending on skills alone, none of them is our match. Jasmine coolly assessed while sweeping the group with her origin sight. Courtesy of husband's care. How could they ever compare? Ileana calmly replied, her origin sight remaining locked on the two religious factions teams. Can't be too harsh on them. In normal times, having such a cultivation level at their age would already be earth-shaking. A pity that this is our era, their achievements, our foils, and their existences are stepping stones. Conrad declared while observing the scene with his origin sight. Unlike spiritual sense, origin sight was nigh untraceable. At the very least, holy rank experts couldn't trace it. Therefore, those disciples didn't have the means to retrace their surveillance. Not that the ongoing clash gave them the time to. Anyways. Eric, Marion. The Blackmar protected by those bronze guards overflows with vast infernal energies. Although it is but a divine seed inheritance, we absolutely cannot allow it to fall in the hands of the infernal cult. Moreover, many useful inheritances hide within. I suggest we backstab them during the next assault, then use our strongest talismans and war puppets to force a quick conclusion," said the golden-haired man in a mental message aimed at his two peers. "Hey, Volker, as a sun spirit, you can't be that dark-hearted. What would your elder brother think if he heard those words?" Marion, the magenta-eyed dream spirit, teasingly replied, "Nonsense. When the interests of faith are concerned, who got time for righteousness? In any case, all things done in the interest of faith are irreproachable." Eric, the short moon spirit, cut. "Talismans are consumables. We should save them for higher floors. War puppets should do the trick." They settled, and as if readying themselves for a desperate fight, let their holy force erupt. Beside them, the infernal cult disciples also exchanged mental messages. Before our departure, the cult leader and Lord Birkin explicitly reminded us that all inheritances of the divine rank must fall into our hands. It must have been the same for them. With their usual modus operandi, there is no way they won't use this fight to backstab us. Miraz, Vozer, let's feign ignorance and beat them at their own game," the inexpressive blood-eyed woman ordered in a mental message. "As you wish, Lady Genera," Miraz Circa replied while Vozer remained silent. Still, Genera didn't doubt he would cooperate. Infernal armament. Genera extended her hand, summoning a long blood sword that magnified the intensity of her aura at shocking speed. At the same time, Vozer summoned an onyx scimitar, and as soon as it landed in his hand, his appearance underwent startling changes. 2 heads and 4 additional arms burst from his neck and sides while his height increased to 3 meters, making him go from a gruff-looking mini-giant to a demonic incarnation of nightmares. Each arm wielded a scimitar, and in that instant, Vozer would reminisce the knowledgeable of the Azuras in hell. Innate skill, golden body, massive golden light erupted from Miraz's body, but unlike with Ison, the golden light then integrated with his flesh and bones, making his olive skin turn into pure gold. With this golden body, beneath the true origin saint rank, nothing could injure him. Behind them, dozens of infernal and celestial elite disciples bared their weapons, releasing their semi-holy and holy forces for the upcoming clash. The 1,500-man strong bronze army before them showed no fear. While the individual bronze soldier was only of the mid-semi-holy rank and the guardian at the mid-rising saint rank, the formation uniting them made their strength overlap, turning them into a unified battalion driven by one soul. Their individual battle power already rivaled that of rising saints, and once they released their combined forces in a single move, even true origin saints would face perils. Facing this force, the leading disciples of the religious forces all came to the same conclusion. Something is wrong with the tower? Alas, even if they knew themselves right, they couldn't retreat. Unless they'd exhausted the limits of their abilities, they couldn't retreat. Their successes were their faction successes. The same went for their failures. And for the religious faction's core members, failure was worse than death. Leading the charge, the infernal team leaders turned into 3 light beams to shoot toward the Bronze Army. But before they could collide with them, the 3 celestial team leaders switched targets. True spirit form. Volker's hairs became bright gold flames, while dazzling sunrays burst from his eyes. Moonlight erupted from Eric's eyes and swirled around his form, while a miniature moon appeared and floated above his head. Mesmerizing clouds formed beneath Marion's feet, and a chanting citadel appeared at his back, its songs bewitching the souls of the feeble. All 3 aimed at their partners of misfortune and, without hesitation, released lethal attacks. But before their moves hit home, the 3 infernal team leaders vanished and reappeared above them. Truly, one can never count on the Celestial Church. Despicable mongrels. Mraz sneered, and from a 175 meters tall golden man turned into a 9 meters tall giant. Neither Voser nor Genera wasted time in idle words and cleaved at the backstabbers. Bang! Instantaneously, the makeshift alliance collapsed, and the 2 sides were back into frantic battle. Led by their guardian, the Bronze Army made use of the opportunity to counterattack. Fellow disciples, use your war puppets to block the Bronze Army's advance. When we're done with these mongrels, we shall come to your aid. All leaders ordered to their respective teams, then resumed fighting. The scene quickly turned hectic, with dozens of holy rank war puppets shouldering the Bronze Army's assault, while the Celestial and Infernal team leaders fought tooth and nails. And while both camps seemed evenly matched, the Infernal cult side seemed to be gaining a slight upper hand. But at that time, clap, 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 a loud clapping sound echoed, and alongside it, a new group appeared. At the helm, a man that looked no older than 18 clapped with a derisive smile plastered on his face. Truly, when men court death, heaven should help them. In such a wretched situation, you even find the time to bear weapons at one another. Impressed? I'm impressed. Conrad sarcastically said. Chapter 231, Where is that clown coming from? Part 2. Conrad's group's sudden appearance took the warring sides aback. While the disciples didn't have the luxury to shift attention, the leaders stopped their confrontation to turn toward the newcomers. And seeing a human youth, their eyes contorted into a frown. At first glance, he bore little similarities to the barbarian continent's humans. The outlandish purple eyes and skin tone giving him the appearance of a holy continent slave, albeit an unreasonably good-looking one. Even Mraz failed to recognize him. After all, the last time he glanced on him, Conrad was nothing more than a baby. But for some reason, Conrad's face bothered him. Still, all recognized him as a secular world ant. But with their priests guarding the entrance, how did he manage to barge in? All eyes shifted toward Mraz. Is this overreaching man somehow related to your house? Genera asked him in a mental message. While Conrad's figure was 80% similar to Tauratha's, the last 20 came from Gulistan, their cult war chief. And when Genera's words echoed within his mind, Mraz frowned. Now he realized why Conrad's looks bothered him so. Clearly, his face bore faint similarities to his aunt's. Could it be? And thinking of the possibility, Mraz's eyes widened in fright. No relationship whatsoever, Mraz categorically replied, and shifted his attention back onto the 3 spirits. Although he didn't know what plans they had in store for him, with his aunt and grandfather having ordered Conrad's identity kept secret, he didn't dare reveal it. But despite the negative answer, Genera thought otherwise. 18 years ago, the Circer depleted their entire merit quota for a summoning ritual, after which Gulistan's cultivation base skyrocketed, pursuing that of her father, and becoming the infernal cult's 3rd strongest. At the same time, many Circer elders saw their cultivation base increase. And overnight, the Circer that ranked last among the 3 ruling houses now pursued the Toril. The most dreadful thing in all this was that while Gulistan and the Circer elders' gains were obvious, no one knew what Birkin gained. Yet, although they seemed to have obtained massive boons, Genera's father, the infernal cult leader firmly believed their real advantages lied elsewhere. but even he couldn't figure it out. Now, an 18-years-old-looking man bearing a slight resemblance to Gulistan appeared. How could this be a coincidence? Secular world clown. I don't know from what podunk you hail from, but the matters of our two forces are not what you can meddle in. Having reached such a stage, you can be considered a talent. However, if you think that gives you the ability to berate your superiors, you're sorely mistaken. The sun spirit, Volker declared and threw a casual palm strike. Dazzling sunlight erupted and morphed into a 10 meters wide sunlight palm that flew toward Conrad. His smile broadened. But before the palm could reach him, Jasmine stepped forward. Purple lightning burst from her form, and she met the sunlight palm with a casual strike of her own. In a flash, the sunlight palm dissolved while Jasmine still stood firm and undisturbed. With this level of skills, how are you qualified to target our husband? Jasmine jeered while her mocking eyes nailed Volker. And instantly, all were startled. Volker more than the rest. Better than anyone. He knew that while this was but a casual palm strike, it was enough to turn anyone beneath the holy rank to ashes. Where did that girl come from? Well said. I'm afraid none of them are fit to lick his boots, to say nothing of trading blows. Ileana's scornful voice echoed. Only now did the six truly pay attention to the 9 breathtaking fairies standing by Conrad's side, each endowed with startling beauty that could launch 10,000 warships. Although they didn't believe them all on the same level, if they were only half as strong, they were a force to be reckoned with. In tandem, the 9 demonesses stepped forward, forming a perfect line before their man. Their auras erupted, and though they went from 4th step semi-saint to early stage rising saint, the dreadful intensity made the 6 disciples unable to look down on them. Inwardly, Miraz despaired. As a dual cultivator, seeing 9 breathtaking fairies appear out of nowhere, of course, he wanted to pluck them, but alas, they belonged to his aunt's son, the only cousin he didn't dare vie with. Worse, to maintain the sham, he had no choice but to battle them. What a pity! What a shame! What a loss! But while Miraz experienced the inner struggles of a lifetime, the others' thoughts wildly differed. When did the secular world produce such experts? Impossible. After all these years of neglecting the secular world, could a secret force have emerged from the shadows? Many wondered. Meanwhile, though 9 peerless beauties blocked his sight, Marian's eyes couldn't leave Conrad. How alluring! He whispered while a strange glint flashed within his eyes. And while they didn't dread the newcomers, the 6 also didn't dare look down on them. My beloved consorts, I must cultivate. Make sure no one disturbs me. Oh, and don't kill the team leaders. As for the rest, hack as you like. Conrad ordered, then stepped forward. With that step, he vanished, reappearing in the air behind the 6 leaders to stand above the clashing disciples and bronze army. The 6 shivered. Better than anyone, they understood that only the space attribute allowed teleportation. Everything else was speed. However, they couldn't track Conrad's moves at all. To their trained eyes, his casual steps were no different from teleportation. With that one move, they realized they didn't play in the same league at all. Generous suspicions deepened, and a strange thought flashed within her mind. Could he be her son? No, if he were, why stand opposite to Miraz? Opposite to us? But she wasn't given time to ponder the issue. Conrad summoned his broadsword, letting his semi-holy force erupt alongside the sword force. Driven by his embryonic Tao, the 2 energies merged into an organic whole while Conrad's eyes locked on the Bronze Army's formation. Thanks to his origin sight, he could see the formation's hidden flaws and target its most vulnerable spots. Driving his sword in a frontal thrust, Conrad released a dazzling sword-shaped beam that pierced the formation's weakest spot and obliterated it in a single blow. His sword then drew a dazzling arc that illuminated the Bronze Army and half the disciples below. No. The leaders all thought in tandem and tried to rush toward their team's aid but, it was far too late. Alongside the 1,500-man strong Bronze Army, The dozens of elite disciples turned into a plethora of masterfully carved pieces that flew in all directions, without an ounce of blood. The Guardian was no exception, and besides the spellcasters that stood several steps behind, all elite disciples perished. Unfazed, Conrad took another step forward and landed above the black mar. The leader's eyes trembled and went bloodshot with veins beating on their temples. Each came with about 30 elite disciples, a total of 90 for each camp. Now, 90 elite disciples of the two factions had perished in a single move, leaving only many pieces to bury. Volker and Genera, in particular, were struck hard. As the youngest children of the Celestial Church and infernal cult leaders, never had they experienced such a slight kill. Chapter 232 Black and White Crystals. Following Volker's roar, a 15 meters tall sun appeared above his head, firing a blinding sunbeam at Conrad. But long before it could reach him, Jasmine appeared in its trajectory. She punched out, releasing a purple lightning ray that collided with the sunbeam in a resounding boom. "I said it before, you're not qualified to trade blows with him," Jasmine stated, her words filling Volker's chest with profound shame. His eyes blazed with glaring wrath. But as Jasmine folded her arms beneath her chest, and rose petals appeared out of thin air to swirl around her form, for an incomprehensible reason, seeing the desolate air within her enthralling eyes, Volker couldn't bear raging at her. As if such a deed was an unforgiving sin within heaven and earth. The emotions burst from his chest, and the more he stared at her, the less rage he felt. Instead, only the desire to enlace and hold her tight against his chest remained. Snapping out of his torpor, Volker flew backward, retreating at hurried pace. His eyes widened in fright. "Damnable temptress, what nefarious bewitching art did you cultivate? Who the hell are you?" Alongside the other team leaders and many of the elite disciples, as soon as he reached the first floor's end, Volker refined a large quantity of pills and elixirs to not just break through to the holy rank, but directly reach the profound saint rank. With his foundation and bloodline before him, even the average secular world early-stage true origin saint could only retreat. In what world was a fourth-step semi-saint lass filling him with dread? If he didn't know better, he would have mistaken her for an infernal realm demoness. Jasmine ignored him, stretching out her arm to summon a holy whip. Although having inherited Conrad's blood, her lineage weapon was a hammer. When given the choice, she'd always resort to the whip. And with the cracking of her whip, the battle officially began. In the meantime, the other team leaders weren't faring much better. Ileana blocked Eric, the small moon spirit's path, while Astarte challenged Marion. From afar, she'd seen the strange glint within Marion's eyes as he stared at Conrad. Though she couldn't be sure of the intent, the possibility by itself required immediate action. "What are your intentions toward my master?" Astarte directly asked, not beating around the bush. Hearing this, an amused Marion's lips curled into a smile. "It's the first time I see a non-dream spirit with such otherworldly looks. Of course, I'm wondering how he tastes in B." But before Marion could finish his words, Astarte vanished and reappeared before him, her battle will erupting in a ferocious punch. Marion's chest caved in, and he flew backward with a large blood spurt. But without giving him time to readjust, Astarte pursued. The remaining 90 celestial and infernal disciples were recoiling in fright, left alone to witness the horrid scene of Conrad refining the 90 deceased souls before plunging into the black mar. Phaedra, Aliki, and Daphne surrounded them from 3 sides, preventing escape while they channeled vast magical powers in devastating spells. Longsword in hand, Zamira stood before Genera, her indifferent, auburn eyes coldly holding Genera's blood hues. Beside her, Freya faced Voser while Lena handled Miraz. It should be mentioned that no one on the scene felt more aggrieved than Miraz. More than anyone, he wanted to retreat, but without an arduous battle, he didn't dare take that road. Although it looked like Conrad's team currently had the upper hand, once the team leaders used their most potent abilities or war puppets, Miraz didn't doubt that their upper hand would collapse at breakneck speed. Were it not for that, he would have openly switched sides. What a hateful situation. But as Miraz floundered, Diana's voice echoed within his mind. Do not hesitate. Switch side and join forces with them. That's the only way to lead what remains of your team to survival. Meanwhile, Conrad sank deeper in the black mar, dropping until he hit the bottom. With his eyes shut close, he sat crossed-legged with his hands resting on his knees and began refining. The black mar's overbearing toxins dived past his pores to refine his Stolas physique and empower it at breakneck speed. And with the vast infernal forces concealed within, the divine primal physique aside, his other physiques obtained massive benefits. The Stolas physique first broke through, reaching the mastered holy stage. Then, the Anzu physique broke through to the same level before stabilizing. While it didn't reach the mastered stage, the Supreme Overlord physique was also substantially enhanced by the infernal forces. Furthermore, unbeknown to him, Conrad's purple ram statuette, the item Talroth left him through Gulistan, now glittered in purple light. But from that purple light, two thumb-sized crystals, one white, the other black, appeared and hovered around Conrad. Simultaneously, deep within his royal palace, Talroth, who sat cross-legged to recuperate from the injuries inflicted onto him by Hell's will, suddenly stood up, his eyes shining with incomparable delight. The seal is broken. Now, the only question is whether he can refine them or not. If he can, the road opens. The others failed, only he remains. Son, my aspiration, my lifelong dream and ambition, all rely on you. You must succeed. Only by crossing this step can the road open. Talroth roared while his eyes shone with crazed hopes and expectations. While battle still raged above the mar, Conrad Stolas' physique completed the absorption of the toxins and reached the awakened divine rank. But Conrad couldn't feel pleased. Because in that very instant, his life faced critical dangers. The black crystal pierced through his chest and dived into his heart, while the white one lodged itself within his abdomen. The white crystal remained inactive. However, the black one began siphoning his blood, draining him of life while overloading his veins with foreign energies. Infernal forces? No. Celestial forces? No. The essence of this energy was something Conrad had never witnessed in his life, something that violated all the laws in the multiverse and opened the door to the unthinkable. At that time, within Conrad's mind, the system's voice echoed. Congratulations, host, on unlocking this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Within the three realms, such crystals are few and far between, located in places that would put even a primogen's life at risk. If you can successfully complete the integration, your future is simply limitless. Moreover, the babies will be mighty. Please allow me to give you some motivation. Side quest initialization. Quest: complete the controlling crystals integration and open the door to becoming an artificial Nephilim. Reward: Titan lineage crystal. Chapter 233: Perfect Integration, Artificial Nephilim. The impromptu side quest and the system's comedic tone brought Conrad no relief. As the black crystal siphoned his blood and the very essence of his demonic lineage, Conrad's skin paled and his eyes widened with blood filling and leaving the scara at a rapid pace. Shivering, he channeled all the infernal forces remaining in the black mar and some of the more overbearing energies lying in the purple ram amulet to stop the lineage siphoning. Crack. But as the demonic energy's pressure suppressed the crystal, cracks appeared on its surface, clearly telling Conrad that if he interrupted the process, the crystal would collapse, bringing alongside it the loss of this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. That was only the first issue. More importantly, if the crystal collapsed within his heart, the consequences were hard to fathom. Even if he didn't die, he'd surely experience lasting damages. For the first time in a very long time, Conrad's face violently distorted, contorting in a horrible grimace. Played. The system and that damnable father had joined hands to play this joke on him. How could it not know that exposing the statuette to a vast source of infernal forces would automatically trigger the crystal's release? With its perfect eyesight, how could it not know of the crystals? It knew, of course it did, and purposefully omitted the information to leave him no choice but to dive into this situation. Son of a... But Conrad couldn't finish his words, the veins on his temple beating harder and life leaving him at breakneck speed. The integration was failing, his blood and essence seemingly unable to satisfy the crystal's greed. Traitorous scum. I will never forget this, Conrad inwardly pledged before letting the entirety of his demonic powers erupt. Purple filled his scara while his skin turned red and two imposing pairs of horns sprang from his forehead. A pair of flesh wings sprouted from his back, and alongside it, Conrad's demonic energies reached a new level. Tapping in his deepest reserves, he stimulated his bloodline to the limit, using his essence to contain the crystal and mend the cracks that formed beforehand. The cracks vanished, and the crystal began using the massive blood and essence it robed to entirely meld with Conrad's heart, all while harmonizing the foreign force with his veins. The excruciatingly painful process dilated his pupils and made him quiver like an average mortal undergoing a violent seizure. Rare! Conrad roared and forcefully stood up. Draining the last bits of infernal forces within the Mar, he used it to supplement his own bloodline and essence, allowing his inner body to sustain the integration. Meanwhile, the Mar went from black to transparent, the toxins and infernal forces within cleared, making the scattered treasures simple to spot. At the same time, the soaring demonic energies sprouting from the deepest recesses of the Mar erupted in a purple brazier, alarming the clashing forces above. Initially, Jasmine's whip effortlessly terrorized Volker, but as the fight went on, and he released his strongest innate skills, the situation reversed, and he slowly regained the advantage. The same scenario repeated on all battlefields. Only the 90 disciples failed to turn any waves, some killed, and the rest suppressed by the combination between Daphne, Phaedra, and Deliki. Weren't you being arrogant? Did you really think your evil art could corrupt a spirit of my caliber? Nonsensical. Volker sneered while his body bathed in blinding sunlight. In that instant, sitting cross-legged, with his arms folded, in the middle of his daunting sun, he looked like a celestial being descended straight from heavens to punish immorality. Jasmine remained impassible, her origin sight drawing Volker's pattern. I already know that you've been using origin sight to obtain my pattern. But so what if you do? Do you think I've never met anyone with origin sight? Allow me to be blunt. Before supreme strength, grasping the pattern matters not. Volker raised his hand, gathering his solar force for a fatal strike. But at that time, the infernal forces within the Mar vanished, and from black, it returned to a clear, transparent hue. At the same time, a new source of infernal forces seemed to burst from the bottom of the Mar, shooting toward the sky in an intimidating brazier of purple flames. Alarmed, all turned toward the purple brazier, and Jasmine's eyes shone with fright. Conrad? Wait, his life force is weakening. How could it be? Something went wrong, horribly wrong. Jasmine inwardly thought while shifting her attention from Volker. The same thought echoed in the minds of all the others. Turning your back to your enemy? Courting death. Volker stretched out his hands, causing his solar force to erupt in a massive explosion aimed toward Jasmine. But at that time, in a twister of purple light and flames, vast demonic energies burst from her form, and within her right hand, a spiked, jet-black hammer appeared. With a 180-degree turn, Jasmine swung her manbreaker at the incoming solar explosion, dispersing its force in a single blow. Plans changed. I no longer have time to play with you. Volker's eyes widened in fright, and he aimed a wobbling index at Jasmine's anxious face. Why you are a demon noble of Taratha's lineage. How could it be? How could it be? What is the mean dash? But before he could finish, Manbreaker's suppression force erupted and crashed onto him, locking him from all sides. Jasmine vanished, reappeared before him, and brought her demonic warhammer down in a ferocious smash. Bang! Volker's left arm was directly lopped off, and he plummeted toward the ground. Eoarg! His mournful howl echoed within the air, speaking tales of his grief. But he wasn't the only one. Both his partners and the infernal team leaders suffered similar fates. Eric, the moon spirit, was sent cratering by Ileana's Manbreaker. Marion collapsed on a tree, severely battered by Astarte's infernal armaments whose might eclipsed that of all the fiends he met. Genera's blood sword failed to contend with Zamira's demonic warhammer, and she too dropped from the sky. Freya's lineage weapon, a pair of metallic claws, hacked Vozer's face, torso, and abdomen. His flesh and blood rained on the ground as he too collapsed. Only Miraz, who, unwilling to risk Diana's advice, chose escape and was currently getting chased by Lena, avoided the miserable fate. The severely wounded team leaders no longer hesitated, using their last bits of force to summon their fate-destroying war puppets. Although they didn't comprehend why those women suddenly showcased pure demonic powers and lineage weapons, they didn't lose sight of their priorities. For now, all questions were set aside. Preserving their lives was more important. But shockingly, the 9 demonesses no longer paid them any heed and shot toward the Mar. Alas, before they could dive into it, they rebounded on an invisible wall raised by the massive infernal force. All recoiled, staggering before stabilizing themselves in the air. Hateful, driven by anxiety, many were about to assume their true forms. But at that time, Zamira's voice echoed. Let's not act rashly. It is Conrad's infernal force that blocks our path. If he can raise such a screen, he should still be fine. Don't lose faith and observe changes. Zamira cautioned. Indeed, our new powers stem from him. What he cannot solve, how can we solve? Right now, we only need to suppress the enemy and await his good news. Lena added before turning back toward the team leaders. Following their senior's advice, the girls calmed their anxiety and shifted their attention back on the team leaders. Each summoned a talisman that rippled with a peculiar energy. Feeling the power within those talismans, the team leaders despaired. Mid-grade holy nullification talismans. As expected of higher realm experts. How could they lack such tools? And this is the end for us. Genera sighed and in defeat, lowered her weapon. While her family worshipped Asherah and descended from his blood fiends, their lineage was far removed from the original fiends and couldn't compare to them. Therefore, even in the infernal realm, they possessed low status. For higher realm demons and first-generation fiends, killing the like of them was no big deal. And since they didn't reveal their status until now, they clearly didn't give a damn about the infernal cult's faithful service. Kowtowing and begging for mercy on account of faith would most likely serve no purpose. Meanwhile, the integration reached its final stages. At this step, it was too late to retreat, and the slightest mistake would result in Conrad imploding. Still, he didn't lose his composure, the purple brazier retracting and vanishing in his pores to assist his internal effort. With surgical precision, he supplemented his body's internal systems, mending veins and organs at breakneck speed to prevent inner collapse. The integration then reached its end, with the black crystal merging with Conrad's heart to become one. At that time, a ray burst from the black crystal to connect it to the white one. Congratulations, host, on completing this side quest. In the future, even primogens shall shiver before your bloodline. Reward time. The system's voice resounded within Conrad's mind. Afterward, an obsidian crystal appeared before him and directly flew into his forehead. The black crystal within his heart fired another ray toward the obsidian crystal, connecting itself to it. Inestimable power erupted from the obsidian crystal to fill Conrad's flesh, veins, bones, and blood. And with the black crystal serving as a conductor, the Titan blood contained within the obsidian crystal perfectly merged with Conrad's phantasm lord blood, thus becoming a brand new lineage. A bright red dot appeared in the middle of Conrad's forehead, and his eyes opened. Dazzling light erupted from them, and as Conrad stood up, though his cultivation hadn't increased in the slightest, the intensity of his aura reached dreadful heights. Perfectly wielding two bloodlines and combining them into a new whole, he'd officially turned into a Nephilim. And while his strength had already experienced startling growth, he knew it far from the limit. Titans were the last level of humanity, the highest human lineage within the three realms, their innate strength unimaginable and all doomed to reach godhood. As far as bloodline level went, Titans surpassed Phantasm Lords. Only when Conrad upgraded his demonic blood to the next level would he truly reach the peak. Meanwhile, the white crystal still needed to be filled with a lineage. A Deva lineage this time. When human, demon, and Deva blood of the highest caliber stood in harmony within him, Conrad would not just be the first artificial Nephilim. He would be the first triple lineage Nephilim within the multiverse, the father of an unparalleled race. Still, he felt no delight, the bitter taste of having been made a fool spreading within his mind. If instead of crystals, explosives hid within the ram statuette, he wouldn't know how he perished. Trusting that what his eyes couldn't see through, the system would warn him of, he didn't pay the ram statuette more attention, merely awaiting the holy rank to refine it and unlock a new physique. Never did he expect that from the start, its true secrets were concealed from him. Explain yourself? Conrad's voice echoed within the system, which upon feeling his discontent hurriedly replied. Misunderstanding. This is a misunderstanding. Chapter 234 Impish Glee. You and I are bound by a common destiny. Your success is my success. If I spotted a threat, of course, I would warn you. Alas, my current eyesight is limited to the divine rank while Tauroth is a legendary god, standing at the pinnacle of godhood. Among the higher realms deities, the Overlord and the Warden aside, who can suppress him? What he wants to conceal, how can I spot? To say nothing of me, even the one that placed me in your soul and sent you into reincarnation isn't any stronger than him. I'm not omnipotent. I swear to the heavens above and the earth below that as the host, my loyalty goes to you, and you only. If anyone dares come between us, though I don't have hands, I will slap them left and right. Please don't doubt me. The system's honorable pledge echoed within Conrad's mind, and though its last words caused black lines to form on his forehead, he was forced to admit the truths that lied in them. Since his rebirth, the system had been there to ease his path. Calling it the building blocks of his exponentially rapid rise was no exaggeration. Without it, at best, he could have activated the flame mark and alongside it his half-demon blood, then headed into House Circer to cultivate according to Guliston's arrangements. At worst, perhaps his remains would now be filling some gutters. Deep down, he knew that even if he possessed no mighty lineage and connections, to begin with, as long as he possessed the system, there was nothing he couldn't accomplish. Thus, unbeknown to him, creating a dependence on a foreign entity whose motives were still unknown. With his suspicious personality, why did he so easily accept Tauratha's gift? Because he believed even if fraud lied within, the system would see through it and warn him of the dangers. Over-reliance. This was over-reliance. Worse, as his bloodline level increased, so did his conceit. The belief that nothing could block his path and that he was born to rule all echoed from his blood, ingraining itself in his marrow. Now, instead of reflecting on his mistakes and mending his flaws, he shifted blame and sought an explanation from one that owed him nothing. Astray. He truly went astray. Ultimately, you can only have faith in yourself. Depending on others will only lead you to a tragic end. But it's fine. It's all fine. Conrad didn't believe more than 20% of the system's story. Although its skills seemed limited to the divine rank, what it could do, no god could manage. No need to mention anything else. The mere ownership of all demon, Deva, and human bloodlines within the three realms was a heaven-defying ability that would fill deities with envy. With such extraordinary skills and resources, How could its existence be limited to the divine rank? Without a shred of doubt, the system possessed extraordinary origins, perhaps even stemming from a force beyond the Warden and the Overlord. At the same time, its recent behavior triggered many hypotheses and suspicions within Conrad's mind. In short, too many questions surrounded it, with the answers nowhere to find. And while it seemed governed by precise rules, having a willful, uncontrollable entity lodged within his soul no longer seemed to be such a good idea. Therefore, Conrad resolved to remove it. A daunting but perfectly doable task that required two things: skills and guts. In fact, I should have planned for this a long time ago. While I don't wish to resort to such extreme means, we can't afford to take chances. We only need that one tool. As for that father, what is it that he wants? World God, Nephilim, what plan could possibly require such ingredients? When even his peers wouldn't dare play the Nephilim breeding game, he actually exerted such resources to open the door for me. Though he planned my birth, there is no love relationship between us. Is he planning to build a new receptacle for his soul to bring his cultivation to another level? No, far-fetched. If that were the plan, he would certainly not leave me in a mortal world. He'd keep me where he could control my growth from A to Z. The more Conrad analyzed the situation, the less he could comprehend Tauratha's motives. But then, a sudden thought flashed in his mind, and his eyes widened in disbelief. Or could it be? No, impossible. If he knows how, why not do it himself? Dismissing the thought, Conrad stretched out his hands, pulling all the treasures and inheritances within the pool toward him and unlocking them at breakneck speed. Unfortunately, he couldn't find the tool he sought. Maybe on the next floor. In any case, now my priority should be to solidify my Tao and increase my cultivation at the fastest pace. The faster, the better. Without further delay, he raised his eyes toward the surface. Why are you not saying anything? Still mad? Ah, come on, don't be such a party pooper. In this dull mortal world, without me, how could you have fun? I'm your best buddy. You partner of fortune and misfortune. The only one that can reward your failures with death. What is there not to love? From time to time, a little prank is necessary to solidify relationships. In the future, you'll thank me for this. Black lines formed on Conrad's forehead, and he used the depths of his self-control to prevent a rage outburst. So, you knew? Yeah, I lied. Of course I knew. I'm omnipotent, unparalleled within the three realms, born supreme. There is nothing I do not know. Mwahaha. The system's impish laughter boomed within Conrad's mind. Pulling in a deep breath, he restrained his ire, the resolve to remove this mischievous imp increasing at a cheetah's speed. But then, he recalled his meeting with Gulistan, and after comparing the system's reaction to previous events, another thought flashed within Conrad's mind. His lips curled into a devilish smile, and saying nothing further, he turned into a beam of light to shoot toward the surface. Meanwhile, within the Holy Flame City, the wind of change blew. Adowin stood above the Holy Flame Church's headquarters, and though alone, his pressure oppressed the entirety of the priests lying within. Even the head exarch Gerhard, with his peak stage cross-tribulation saint cultivation, shivered beneath Adowin's aura. Droplets of sweat filled his forehead, and without hesitation, he shot toward Amalia's cultivation chambers. Unable to pay decorum any heed, Gerhard barged in. The dowager, Amalia, sat crossed-legged in her chambers with massive fate force swirling around her form. Having recently broken through to the cross-tribulation saint rank, her status within the church had reached a new level. But as soon as Gerhard barged in, her closed eyes opened and locked onto him. The situation is terrible. Adowin is here to subjugate us all. Only you can reason with him. Can I count on your support? He directly asked, not beating around the bush. Naturally, Amalia replied with a simple nod and stood up. The two vanished, then reappeared above the church, hovering in the sky before Adowin. Grand Preceptor, the imperial family, and the church have always been on good terms, while for millennia, I've given you the respect due to a senior. Why is it that today you stand before our gate with such a threatening stance?" Gerhard asked, his tone filled with righteous indignation. Adalwin didn't reply, but the pressure around Gerhard increased, and he could now feel his bones crackle under its oppression. His face distorted into an ugly grimace. "Intolerable. Do you think that just because Yodash?" Gerhard began, but before he could finish his words, a slender arm pierced his back, pushing his heart out of his chest and holding it within a translucent palm. Pooh! Blood gushed from Gerhard's chest, mouth, and back, and he turned his trembling face toward the owner of the backstabbing hand. His eyes fell on Amalia, who emotionlessly held his gaze. "Why, oh why? For all those years, haven't I treated you the best? Even if you can't give me your heart, on account of millennia of friendship, how could you?" He stammered with blood trickling down his chin while his eyes widened in disbelief. "Nonsensical. Do you think I don't know you're the one that helped Ulrich murder my husband? On the one hand, out of fear of his talent, on the other hand, out of misguided jealousy. When you gave that bastard son the tribulation poison, why didn't you think of our years of friendship? Having murdered my beloved, killing you in one move, is already showing you mercy." Amalia spat, pulled Gerhard's heart from his chest, and crushed it within her hand. Thinking of the past, Gerhard's lips curled into a bitter smile, and tears dropped from his dying eyes. "Regret. In the past I should have." But before he could finish his words, the last spark of life left him, and his corpse tumbled from the sky. Thus, after almost 2,000 years of reign, the Holy Flame Church's head exarch perished before his cathedral. The aftermath was simple. The priests, bishops, archbishops, and exarchs all submitted to Adalwin's leadership, electing Amalia as their new head exarch. Within the Holy Flame Empire, the von Jürgen now officially controlled both the nobility and the clergy. Or so they thought. Chapter 235 Titan Mark. Conrad's avatar in the Holy Flame Empire sat cross-legged within Nil's mother, Enk's chambers, while the conquered mother lied beside him with his spunk trickling down her lips and thighs. Currently, he was holding a mental conversation with Ileana's father, Wolfgang. "Boss, although the goal nears completion, we're now facing serious problems," Wolfgang declared with an unconstrained sense of urgency. "What's the situation?" "After taking control of the black market, our underground deals have been going smoothly. With the recipes you set at my disposal, we've quickly refined more potent drugs. Now, drops of heavens of the transcendent rank freely circulate within the nobility. Faced with the shocking cultivation benefits and miraculous properties, even with the news of their addictive effect spreading, the low and mid-level nobility didn't hesitate. The addicts' quantity increased at breakneck speed, with many nobles willing to ruin generations of accumulated wealth to obtain the pills. Afterward, we introduced the orchids that constrained the addictive effect and ensnared the reticent. Now, it's not an exaggeration to say that from commoners to mid-level nobility, all are under your control." Wolfgang began, pulling an approving nod from Conrad. "I naturally know of all this. Meanwhile, Kron and Margot have successfully tamed the high nobility, and with their support, we've expanded the operation to the various towns and cities. Now, from commoners to high nobility, the Holy Flame Empire is in my hand." "Indeed, but from the start of his regency, Adalwin has been investigating our operations. Now that he has taken control of the Holy Flame Church, he's free to focus on uprooting our cartels. Although the die is cast and he can no longer change the current situation with his strength, once he retraces those events to me, House Cracked is done for." Wolfgang's worries echoed within Conrad's mind. "Your concerns are not unfounded. While our pawn's loyalty is absolute, Adalwin and his goons can forcefully browse through their memories and trace the events back to you. Fortunately, I can rewire their memories at any time. We will sacrifice a few of them to prepare a scapegoat for Adalwin to destroy. You don't have to worry about that." From his study, Wolfgang heaved a sigh of relief. "However, there is one thing I'm worried about. Your clash with the imperial family and the resentment between Kracht and von Jürgen is common knowledge. Although you've abandoned politics to become a merchant, Adalwin is likely to remove all hidden dangers. This is the real problem. While your cultivation has improved by leaps and bounds, you're still a semi-saint. Once he starts his cleanup, there is nothing you can do to stop him. As my servant, I can save you, but I cannot save the rest," Conrad explained, and his words caused Wolfgang's placated worries to resurface. "Worry not. The Kracht are my people. My people, no one can harm. First, abandon the city and alongside your family, return to your fief. The avatars in the Profane Sea dynasty and other nations will coordinate with us to collapse the Holy Flame Empire's economy and buy us time. For the remainder of the month, you'll be the least of his problems. When the main body returns, Adalwin will feed his ancestors' graves." "Thank you, boss, for your protection," Wolfgang replied with a deep bow. And though Conrad couldn't see it, the gratefulness within his words spoke myriads. Their exchange ended, and Conrad returned to the Imperial Harem takeover task, the last requirement for completing the current main quest. Meanwhile, the true Conrad emerged from the Mar, soaring into the sky before stabilizing himself and lowering his eyes on the scene below. The girls had wholly subdued the team leaders whose cultivations were sealed while they knelt on the grassy ground. As for the 75 surviving disciples, they endured a similar fate. Miraz, who'd been forcefully brought back by Diana, also stood within the lot, his wronged expression telling tales of his inner grief. As soon as Conrad emerged from the Mar, all eyes locked on him, but the emotions greatly varied. On his women's face, relief shone, while on the others, dread and anxiety intertwined. Only Voser and Genera remained stoic. The first because fear didn't exist within his heart, the second because there was nothing to be afraid of. Since they were captured and not killed, the demons clearly had use for them. If only for some time, their lives could be preserved. In a slow descent, Conrad dropped from the sky, landing before the gathering. "Your BA-, Jasmine began, but failed to finish her words because as soon as Conrad landed before them, all felt a horrifying pressure drop on their shoulders and force them onto the ground. In a resounding thud, the ladies all dropped on their knees, unable to keep their backs straight. Their eyes widened in disbelief. To say nothing of them, even Conrad was startled. As the body's owner, he didn't realize that following the Titan bloodline acquisition, his aura had experienced drastic changes, and an overbearing force now rippled within. That force indiscriminately suppressed and oppressed those who stood too close to him, and gave him the air of an insurmountable colossus whose mere presence produced awe and deference. Without delay, Conrad used his transformation skill to contain the effects and return his aura to the usual human one. The pressure thus vanished, allowing the ladies to return to their feet. In tandem, they stood up, but their eyes now shone with stupor. "Master, in the end, what happened to you at the bottom of the Mar? We were all riddled with worry. But now, it seems like you're several times more powerful than before." Astarte inquired, speaking the words that echoed in the others' minds. As a first-generation fiend bred by Conrad, her bond to him was even stronger than that of the rest. Meanwhile, Diana kept her mouth shut, not daring to step in. "Oh, you could say that I got cucked and blessed at the same time," Conrad straightforwardly replied before lowering his eyes on the kneeling team leaders. "You what?" Wide, blinking eyes stared at him with glaring incomprehension. However, Conrad ignored them to sweep the vanquished team leaders with his purple gaze. At first, no one remarked the bright red in the middle of his forehead. But when Genera's eyes rose to his, she immediately spotted the mark which caused fright to shine within her blood hues. "You? Aren't you a demon noble? Why do you bear the mark of Titans?" Although they'd never seen one in their lives, With the knowledge their ancestors brought from the higher realms and their status within their factions, most of the team leaders knew about Titans. Only Marion, who'd always lazed on homework and loathed history, couldn't recognize it. And following Jenra's words, their eyes locked on the mark, which, combined with the pressure they felt a moment ago, made the leaders realize a genuine Titan stood before them. But how could it be? Too many questions swirled within their minds, with no answer making sense. Perplexed, Conrad summoned a mirror to observe his current looks. I see. Again, he used his transformation skill, this time to conceal the mark, then returned his attention onto the frightened leaders. According to history, the Titan lineage was one of the most dreaded within the higher realms. Though they were very few of them, their innate talent, strength, and resilience defied reason. Although unlike the high-level demons and Devis, they weren't born with cultivation bases. A 3-year-old Titan could effortlessly bend trees. Better, it was said that without a significantly higher cultivation level, no one could kill a Titan god. Were it not for their pathetically few numbers, the human race's status within the higher realms would undoubtedly be more glorious. What I am matters not. What matters is that from now on, you all become my pawns. Conrad waved his hands, causing irresistible telekinetic energies to force open the leaders' and surviving disciples' mouths. Phantasm orchids then appeared and flew down their throats. Gulp. Unable to resist, all swallowed the orchids. Conrad cared little about the surviving disciples. Although they were considered elite disciples, their status within the Celestial Church and Infernal Cult was a far cry from their leaders. Volker, Eric, and Marion were respectively the youngest children of the Celestial Church leader, the Great Elder, and the Second Elder. Jenra was the only daughter of the Infernal Cult leader, while Voser was the Second Elder's grandson, and Miraz the Great Elder, Berkenserker's most favored grandson. Even among the faction's core members, they ranked high. There was nothing those disciples could do or find out that they couldn't. Were it not for the made-up story he prepared, they would have followed their peers to the grave. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.